Hey guys, tonight we're slipping back 25 centuries to ancient Athens, where you're waking up before dawn as one of the city's midwives. And let me tell you, this job makes modern labour and delivery nurses look like they're working in a spa. You're about to spend the next 12 to 18 hours elbow deep in the messy, terrifying, sacred work of bringing new Athenians into the world, armed with nothing but olive oil, prayers, and a knowledge of women's bodies that male physicians are too squeamish to learn. The mortality rate? Well, you probably won't survive to old age in this profession, infection, exhaustion, and the occasional angry husband who blames you when things go wrong tend to cut careers short. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love seeing the global bedtime community we've built. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The rooster hasn't even considered crowing yet, but your eyes snap open in the darkness. No alarm clocks in 450 BCE. Athens, your body just knows when it's that purple-black hour before dawn, when the oil lamps have gutted out and the city holds its breath between night and day. You lie still for a moment on your wool-stuffed mattress, listening. Your husband snores softly on the other side of the small room. Somewhere in the house you hear one of your daughters cough, the younger one probably, who always catches whatever's going around the neighbourhood. Your feet find the cold floor and you suppress a shiver. Even Mediterranean winters have teeth at this hour. You feel your way to where your chiton hangs on a peg, the fabric still smelling faintly of the rosemary and lavender you crushed yesterday. Historians still argue whether midwives in classical Athens wore anything distinctive to mark their profession, but you know the women in your neighbourhood recognise you by the permanent olive oil stains on your sleeves and the way you walk quick, purposeful, like someone who might need to run at any moment. The household is starting to stir. You can hear your mother-in-law moving around in the courtyard. She's always up before everyone, feeding the chickens and muttering prayers to Hestia. The old woman disapproves of your work, thinks it's unseemly for a citizen's wife to be traipsing around the city at all hours, touching other women's bodies, witnessing things no modest woman should see. But the work pays, and after your husband's pottery business took that hit last year when his kiln collapsed, your income keeps the family fed. Funny how principles become flexible when stomachs start growling. You splash water on your face from the basin cold enough to make you gasp and begin the mental inventory that's become ritual. Today you might deliver a baby, or two, or you might spend hours coaching a labouring woman only to have nothing happen, sending you home exhausted and unpaid. You might see a healthy infant take its first breath, or you might watch helplessly as a mother hemorrhages despite everything you know, everything you've learned from the elder midwives who trained you. Here's something they don't teach in those Hollywood sword and sandals epics. Ancient Athens runs on the invisible labour of women like you. While philosophers debate democracy in the agora and playwrights stage their tragedies, you're the one ensuring the next generation of citizens actually makes it out of the womb alive. Male physicians, host self-important followers of Hippocrates 1 to 10 births. Too messy, too undignified, too female. They'll theorize about wombs and humours and write lengthy treatises about childbirth, but ask them to actually catch a baby and they'll suddenly remember an important appointment across town. So the work falls to you and women like you, experienced, trained, legally recognized by the city as maive, ancient Greek word for midwife, literally meaning mother-woman. You've attended maybe 200 births in your 15 years of practice. You've developed a reputation for staying calm when everyone else is screaming, for knowing which herbs actually work versus which ones are just expensive placebos sold by charlatans in the market. Your birthing bag sits by the door where you left it last night, a worn leather satchel that contains your professional life. You check it by feel in the dimness, clean wool strips for swaddling, your bronze-cutting blade for umbilical cords, packets of dried pennyroyal and mugwort, vials of olive oil, sea sponges, that Egyptian amulet shaped like a frog that one client swears helped her through 3 deliveries. You don't necessarily believe in the amulet's power, but you've learned that belief itself can be medicine. If a laboring woman feels protected by a clay frog goddess, who are you to argue? The sky outside is shifting from black to that deep blue that means you have maybe 30 minutes before sunrise. You eat a piece of yesterday's barley bread, dipping it in wine breakfast of champions, if by champions you mean sleep-deprived women about to spend their day in someone else's bodily fluids. Your husband mumbles something from the bed, still half asleep. You tell him you'll be back when you're back. He knows better than to ask where you're going or when you'll return. The babies come when they come, not according to anyone's schedule. You step into the courtyard just as the first hint of pink touches the eastern sky. The air smells like wood smoke and the neighbours' goats and possibility. Somewhere in Athens, a woman is in labour right now or will be within the hour. Your services will be needed. They always are, and you're ready as anyone can be, to guide a soul from the darkness of the womb into the uncertain light of ancient Greece. You settle down on the courtyard bench with your birthing bag, running through the contents one more time in the growing dawn light. This is your pre-flight checklist, except instead of making sure a plane won't crash, you're making sure you won't show up to a delivery missing the one thing that could save a mother's life. No pressure or anything. First, the olive oil. You've got 2 small amphoras of Itone plain, one infused with chamomile that you prepared last month during the full moon. Not because lunar timing actually matters for herb infusion, but because your clients expect it, and expectations shape outcomes in ways that would make Hippocrates write another treatise. The olive oil serves a dozen purposes: lubricant for examinations, massage oil for perineal stretching, moisturizer for cracked nipples after birth, and in a pinch, lamp fuel if you're delivering a baby through the night and someone forgot to stock enough oil. That last one happened to you exactly once, 3 years ago, and you've been paranoid about lighting ever since. Try catching a baby in complete darkness, and you'll understand why every midwife has her quirks. Next to the oil sit, you'll see sponges, 5 of them, each about the size of your palm, still slightly damp from when you boiled them yesterday in wine and water. These are your workhorses, your multi-tools. You'll use them to wipe away blood and fluids, to provide cool compresses for feverish mothers, to clean the newborn. The fancy medical texts say sponges should be harvested only from specific coastal areas and blessed by priests, but honestly, a sponge is a sponge. You get yours from a dealer in Piraeus who probably tells the same, blessed by Poseidon himself, story to every buyer. The herbal bundles come next, and this is where your training really shows. You've got dried pennyroyal for encouraging contractions when labour stalls, though you use it sparingly because too much can poison both mother and child. There's mugwort for the same purpose, wrapped in linen and labelled in your own scratchy handwriting that your daughter teases you about. Historians still argue whether ancient Greek midwives were literate, but you learned your letters from your mother, who learned from hers, because how else are you supposed to keep track of which dried plant is which when they all look like brown crumbles after 6 months? You've got yarrow for postpartum bleeding, which works about 70% of the time and does absolutely nothing. The other 30%, but 70 is better than 0. There's fenugreek to encourage milk production, though you usually recommend that after the birth, not during, and hidden in a separate pouch, wrapped carefully so the smell doesn't escape. You've got silphium, the expensive contraceptive herb that grows only in Cyrenaica and costs more per ounce than some people earn in a month. You don't advertise that you carry it. Women who need it know to ask quietly in coded language, because Athens has complicated feelings about preventing pregnancy versus causing it, and you'd rather not explain the distinction to a magistrate. Your bronze blade sits in its leather sheath, small and wickedly sharp. You honed it yourself 2 days ago, testing the edge on a piece of linen until it sliced through with barely any pressure. This blade cuts umbilical cords, and occasionally, though you don't mention this to squeamish client, it performs emergency procedures that male physicians claim are impossible. That aphorism about desperate times and desperate measures? You live it about twice a year, usually at 3 in the morning when everyone's crying and you have to make decisions that no one should have to make. The wool strips for swaddling are clean, boiled, dried in sunlight, and folded precisely. You're obsessive about this because you once saw a baby develop a rash from dirty swaddling that turned septic within days. The infant survived, barely, but you've never forgotten the mother's accusations, the family's anger, the way your reputation in that neighborhood curdled overnight. Now you boil everything until your hands are raw and you sleep better for it. Then there are the amulets, and oh boy, this is where medicine meets theatre. You've got a small clay figure of Eilephia, goddess of childbirth, with her hands raised in blessing. There's that Egyptian frog amulet we mentioned earlier, which supposedly channels Heket, their frog-headed birth goddess, because apparently divine amphibians are a thing in multiple cultures. You've got a hematite stone that's meant to prevent hemorrhaging, though you suspect its actual power is giving you something to press into a labouring woman's palm so she has something to grip besides your arm, which still bears bruises from last week's delivery. Here's a quirky bit of obstetric history. Some midwives carry eagle stone shallow rocks that rattle when you shake them, supposedly found in eagles' nests. They're meant to ease labour when tied to the mother's thigh. You don't have one because they cost a fortune, and you're skeptical about the eagle nest origin story, but you've seen colleagues swear by them. The placebo effect is real, and if rattling stones help women through contractions, who are you to judge? You also pack clean linen strips for binding mothers' bellies after delivery, a small jar of honey for energy and wound treatment, and a vial of wine both for sterilizing and for offering the new mother a celebratory sip if everything goes well. The wine is terrible, honestly, the cheap stuff from your brother-in-law's vineyard that tastes like regret and fermented olives, but it's the thought that counts. At the bottom of your bag, wrapped in oiled cloth, sit your most valuable possessions, the wax tablets where you keep notes. Birth dates, maternal symptoms, labour duration, infant outcomes, herbal dosages that worked or didn't. This is your personal medical journal, the accumulated wisdom of 15 years of practice. When you die, you'll pass these tablets to your apprentice, just as your teacher passed hers to you. This is how knowledge survives in a world without medical schools or textbooks own midwife to the next. An unbroken chain of women keeping other women alive. The sun is properly up now, painting the courtyard walls honey gold. You cinch your bag closed and sling it over your shoulder. Its familiar weight settles against your hip like an old friend. You're ready for whatever this day brings. Probably. You're just considering whether you have time to check on your daughters before leaving when fate makes the decision for you. 3 sharp knocks rattle your door, the urgent kind, the someone's in trouble kind. Your stomach tightens. This is either a birth or bad news, and in your profession, those categories overlap more often than you'd like. You open the door to find a young male slave, maybe 14, bent over and gasping like he's just run the Panathenaic Stadium race. Sweat plasters his tunic to his skinny frame, and his feet are bleedings, holes wearing sandals, so worn they're basically leather suggestions. He gulps air and manages to blurt out, "My master's wife, the baby, she needs you now." "Slow down," you tell him, though your pulse is already quickening. Whose household? Callias, son of Hipponikos. He's still panting. The house near the temple of Hephaestus. "Please, she's been labouring since yesterday's sunset, and the pain." He breaks off, looking genuinely terrified, which tells you everything. First-time fathers send panicked slaves. Experienced fathers know babies come in their own time. You do quick mental math. The temple of Hephaestus is on the other side of the agora, maybe a 20-minute walk at normal pace. If she's been labouring since sunset, and they're only calling you now, at dawn, either this is her first baby, and they waited too long, or something's going wrong. Neither option is great. Tell your master I'm coming. Go. You wave him off, and he sprints away, apparently having caught his second wind. Meanwhile, you're running your own calculations, wealthy household, which means they can pay, but also means higher expectations. If this goes badly, Callias will have the resources to make your life difficult. If it goes well, his wife might recommend you to her friends, and suddenly you're the midwife to Athens's elite. High old double-edged sword, that social mobility thing. You stick your head back inside and call to your mother-in-law that you're leaving. She appears from the cooking area, scowling as usual. Again? You were gone until moonrise yesterday. Babies don't consult my schedule, you say, which is the same thing you always say, and she makes the same disapproving noise she always makes. This is your routine, this little dance of domestic tension. Your husband mumbles something supportive from the bedroom, bless him, and you're out the door before the argument can properly start. The streets are waking up. Early rising slaves are carrying water jars from the fountain, shopkeepers are setting up their wares, and the city's perpetual stray dogs are beginning their daily patrol for scraps. You adjust your bag and start walking fast, quite running because respectable citizen wives don't run through Athens unless something's on fire, but definitely moving with purpose. Here's something they don't mention in the history books. Ancient Greek cities weren't designed for women in a hurry. The streets are narrow, winding and crowded even at dawn. You have to navigate around a vendor unloading amphorae from a cart, dodge a group of men heading to the gymnasium, and sidestep a truly heroic pile of donkey dung that someone should really clean up but probably won't. Your wool hemation keeps trying to slip off your shoulder, so you clutch it tighter and keep moving. A few people recognize you and call out greetings. "Midwife! Off to catch another baby?" Old Theophilus, the bread seller, grins toothlessly. You wave without stopping. Your reputation in this neighborhood is solid. You've delivered half the children currently running around these streets, including Theophilus's granddaughter last spring, a breech birth that could have gone very wrong but didn't, thank Artemis. But here's the uncomfortable reality. A woman walking alone through Athens at dawn draws attention, and not all of it friendly. You pass a group of younger men who make comments you pretend not to hear. Historians still argue whether midwives enjoyed a sort of professional immunity from the usual restrictions on women's movement, but in practice it depends on who's watching and what mood they're in. Your profession buys you some freedom, but it doesn't make you invisible to harassment. You walk faster. The agora is already bustling. Even though the main market action won't start for another hour, early bird vendors are claiming their spots, arguing over who gets the prime real estate near the tholos. You cut through the crowd, mentally mapping the fastest route, past the Stoa of Zeus, around the law courts, up toward the Hephaestion rising on its hill. Your legs are burning. You're in decent shape from all this walking, but speed hiking across Athens with a heavy bag isn't exactly leisurely. A philosopher, at least, someone wearing the shabby cloak philosophers favour us already holding forth near the painted stoa, gesturing dramatically about something. Justice? Virtue? The nature of the cosmos? You don't have time to find out. While he's debating abstract concepts, you're rushing to deal with the very concrete reality of a woman trying to push a human being out of her body. Funny how philosophy and obstetrics occupy such different worlds, even when they're happening in the same city. You're sweating now despite the cool morning air. Your hemation has given up all pretense of staying in place, and you've tucked it awkwardly into your belt. Definitely not a dignified look, but dignity loses to efficiency when someone's in labour. You pass a shrine to Artemis and pause just long enough to murmur a quick prayer, not because you're especially pious, but because every little bit of divine favour helps, and Artemis is the goddess who eases childbirth when she's in a good mood. The temple of Hephaestus looms ahead now, its marble columns catching the early sunlight. Somewhere near here is Callias's house, and somewhere in that house is a woman who needs you. You can almost feel the urgency humming in your bones, that professional instinct that tells you when a situation is serious. You break into an actual run for the final stretch, social respectability be damned. A woman in labour doesn't care about your reputation. She just needs you to show up and know what you're doing. Time to earn your fee. You spot the house from 50 paces away. It's the one with the expensive painted door and the courtyard wall high enough to announce, "We have things worth stealing." Callias's residence sits in one of Athens's better neighbourhoods, where the houses are larger and the streets slightly less clogged with refuse. Even the stray dogs here look better fed. You're breathing hard from your sprint walk, and you pause at the doorway to compose yourself. Can't show up gasping like you're unfit for the work. You smooth down your hair, adjust your bag, and knock firmly. Professional, confident, like you haven't just speed walked across half of Athens at dawn. The door swings open before your third knock. A female slave, maybe 40, takes one look at your bag and practically drags you inside. Finally, she's been screaming for hours. The master is, well, you'll see. The household is in controlled chaos. You can hear the labouring woman from Herello moaning, punctuated by sharper cries that tell you she's in active labour, possibly transition if those sounds are any indication. Several slaves are rushing around looking busy but accomplishing nothing, which is typical. An older woman, probably the mother or mother-in-law, hovers in the courtyard wringing her hands. And there, pacing near the household altar, is presumably Callias himself. He's younger than you expected, maybe 30, with the kind of carefully trimmed beard that requires a slave's daily attention. His hymation is expensive wool, dyed a deep crimson that cost more than your entire wardrobe. He spots you and rushes over, desperation leaking through his aristocratic composure. Are you the midwife? They said you were the best. My wife, she's suffering terribly. Can you help her? Will she live? He's gripping your arm now, which is both inappropriate and understandable. Rich men aren't accustomed to feeling helpless, and childbirth is the great equalizer. All the money in Athens can't make a cervix dilate faster. I need to examine her, you say firmly, gently extracting your arm from his grip. How long has she been in labour? Since yesterday evening. Sunset, perhaps? The pain started slowly, but now. He gestures helplessly toward the women's quarters where another cry echoes. Is this normal? Should it take this long? Historians still argue whether ancient Greek husbands were typically present during their wives' labours, but in your experience, first-time fathers always hover anxiously until you or the mother-in-law kicks them out. You give Callias your practiced reassuring smile, the one that says, I've done this before and probably know more than you without actually saying it. First babies often take their time. I'll know more once I've seen her. You turn to the hovering mother-in-law. I'll need clean water, lots of it, and more lamps in the birthing room. And wine, good wine, not the cooking stuff. The older woman bristles slightly at being given orders in her own household, but she's worried enough to comply. She snaps at a slave to fetch what you've requested, then leads you toward the gyneconitis, the women's quarters. Behind you, you hear Callias asking whether he should send for a physician, and you resist the urge to laugh. A physician? What's he going to do, quote Hippocrates, at her uterus? The birthing room is stuffy and dim, lit by maybe 3 oil lamps that create more shadows than illumination. Remember that lamp oil paranoia we mentioned? This is why. You make a mental note to get more light in here immediately. The room smells of sweat, fear, and the iron tang of blood, though you don't see excessive bleeding yet, which is good. And there, on a birthing stool, an actual proper birthing stool, not just a improvised chair is your patient. She's young, maybe 18, 20 at most. Her dark hair is plastered to her skull with sweat, and her chiton is hiked up around her waist. 2 slaves are supporting her, one on each side, but they look terrified and useless. The girl's face is flushed, her eyes wide with pain and fear, and when she sees you, fresh tears start streaming. Please, she gasps between contractions. Please help me, it hurts so much. I can't do this anymore. Here's a quirky historical detail. Ancient Greek birthing stools were specifically designed with a U-shaped seat that allowed the baby to emerge while gravity did some of the work. Archaeological evidence shows they were common in wealthy households, and this one looks well-made carved olive wood, smooth from use, with good handholds on the sides. At least Callias spent money on the right things. You set down your bag and approach slowly, keeping your voice calm and warm. I'm here now. My name is... You give your name, though honestly she probably won't remember it through the pain. I've delivered hundreds of babies. You're going to be fine, and we're going to get through this together. But first, I need to see what's happening. Can you let me examine you? She nods, whimpering, and you turn to the slaves. One of you fetch those lamps I asked for. The other can stay, but stop looking like you're at a funeral. Birth is messy and loud, but it's also natural. Act like you've seen it before. You haven't, clearly, but fake it. The mother-in-law is still hovering in the doorway. You catch her eye. Has her water broken? Hours ago. There was a lot of fluid. Good. That's one milestone checked. You kneel beside the birthing stool and gently place a hand on the young woman's knee. She's trembling, every muscle tense with fear and exhaustion. This is the moment where you either gain her trust or lose it. Listen to me, you say quietly, holding her gaze. Your body knows what to do. My job is to help it along and catch your baby when they're ready. But I need you to breathe with me. Can you do that? Another contraction hits and she cries out, gripping the stool's handles so hard her knuckles go white. You count silently. The contraction lasts maybe 60 heartbeats, which is strong, but not abnormally long. When it passes, she sags, panting. Good, you tell her. You're doing exactly what you should be doing. Now, between the next contraction, I'm going to check how far along you are. It might be uncomfortable, but I'll be quick. You pour some of that chamomile-infused olive oil onto your hands, warming it between your palms. The girl watches you with desperate hope, like you're Asclepios himself descended from Olympus. The pressure of expectation settles on your shoulders, familiar and heavy. Time to find out exactly what you're dealing with. You wait for the contraction to fully pass, watching the young woman's breathing settle into something less panicked. Timing is everything in this work examined during a contraction, and you'll hurt her unnecessarily and get inaccurate information. Examine between contractions and you can actually feel what's happening. What's your name? You ask, keeping your voice gentle as you position yourself. Myrrhine, she whispers. Beautiful name, Myrrhine. I'm going to touch you now. Deep breath for me. You slide one oiled hand carefully inside, feeling for the cervix. This is the moment of truth, the tactile assessment that tells you whether you're dealing with early labor that's going to drag on for hours or active labor that means you might be holding a baby within the next couple of hours. The cervix is, you probe gently, mapping the opening with your fingertips. It's thin, soft, and dilated to about 7 or 8 fingers width. In modern terms, we'd call that 7 to 8 centimeters, but you measure by what you know how many of your fingers fit through the opening. 8 fingers means she's in the home stretch, thank the gods. Her water breaking hours ago with contractions this strong? This baby is coming today, probably within the next few hours, if everything goes normally. But then you feel something that makes your stomach clench. The baby's head is there, yes. You can feel the hard curve of skull pressed against the cervix, but it's not quite right. The position is slightly off-center, maybe a bit deflexed, which would explain why labor has been so painful and why it's taking longer than it should. The baby needs to rotate, to tuck their chin and navigate through the pelvic opening at the right angle. Sometimes they figure this out on their own. Sometimes they need help. You withdraw your hand slowly, wiping it on a clean cloth. Myrrhine is watching your face with terrified intensity, trying to read your expression for doom or hope. You've learned to keep your face neutral during examinations. Stuffing scares a laboring woman faster than her midwife looking worried. Good news, you tell her, and you mean it. You're very close. The baby's head is right where it should be, pressing down. Your body is doing exactly what it needs to do. Then why does it hurt so much? She's crying again, tears cutting tracks through the sweat on her cheeks. My mother said labor was painful, but your mother was right, and also probably left out some details to avoid scaring you. You squeeze her hand. Here's the truth. You're in the hardest part right now. This is what we call transition. When the baby is getting into final position, it's intense, it's overwhelming, and it feels impossible. But it's also usually the shortest part. You're almost there. This is technically true, though you're simplifying the obstetric reality. Ancient Greek medical theory, based largely on Hippocratic texts that you've heard read aloud at training sessions, suggests that labor pain comes from the womb opening and the infant essentially fighting its way out. Modern medicine would talk about cervical dilation, uterine contractions, and pressure on nerve endings. But the end result is the same. It hurts like Hades, and there's not much you can do about it except manage expectations and offer comfort. Here's a mainstream historical fact. Greek midwives like you were legally required to be freeborn women who had given birth themselves. The theory was that you couldn't guide someone through something you hadn't experienced. You've had 3 children, so you know exactly what Maureen is feeling. That sense of your body being hijacked by forces beyond your control, the animal panic that rises when the pain peaks, the desperate desire for it to just be over. Another contraction builds, and you can see it rolling through her body like a wave. She grips the birthing stool handles and lets out a low, guttural moan that makes the remaining slave shift uncomfortably. But you recognize that sound it's the deep, primal noise of a woman bearing down, and it means her body is starting to push whether she's consciously doing it or not. That's it, you encourage. Don't fight it. When you feel that pressure, go with it. Your body knows what to do. The mother-in-law has returned with more lamps, and the room brightens considerably. You can see Mirine more clearly now, the way her whole abdomen tightens and hardens during the contraction, visible even through her hiked-up chitin. You can see the strain in her thighs, the desperate concentration on her face. When the contraction passes, you reach for your bag and pull out one of the herbal bundles. I'm going to burn some mugwort, you tell the room at large. It helps strengthen contractions and encourages the baby to come. Does mugwort actually do this? Historians still argue whether ancient herbal remedies had genuine pharmacological effects or were pure placebo. You've seen it work often enough that you believe in it, but you're also honest enough to admit you're not entirely sure whether it's the herb or the ritual of administering it that helps. Either way, if Mirine believes it's helping, it probably is. You light the bundle from one of the oil lamps and let the smoke waft through the room. The sharp, slightly bitter scent fills the space, mixing with the smell of sweat and olive oil. The mother-in-law wrinkles her nose but says nothing. "How much longer?" Mirine gasps. "Please, tell me how much longer." This is the question every labouring woman asks, and it's the one you can never truly answer. You could say, maybe 2 hours, maybe 4, but that's not what she wants to hear. She wants certainty in an inherently uncertain process. Your baby will come when they're ready, you say instead. But based on what I've felt, I don't think you'll be pregnant by sunset. That's a promise. It's a calculated promise. You're confident enough to make it, but vague enough to give yourself room if complications arise. This is the art of midwifery, balancing hope against reality, confidence against caution, knowing when to reassure and when to prepare people for harder news. Mirine nods weakly, clinging to your words like a lifeline. Another contraction is building. You can see it in the way her breathing changes, the way her eyes go distant and focused inward. You settle in beside the birthing stool, your hand resting on her knee. You're here now. You're committed. Whatever happens in the next few hours, you'll guide her through it. This is what you do. This is who you are. Between contractions, you take stock of the birthing room's spiritual preparedness. Ancient Greek childbirth isn't just a medical event, it's a religious one, a threshold moment when the divine and mortal worlds brush up against each other. You've learned that ignoring the ritual aspect is a good way to lose a client's trust, even if you privately think some of it is theatre. Has anyone made offerings to Artemis today? You ask the mother-in-law. She looks affronted. Of course. We sacrificed a dove at the household altar at dawn. Good. And Eileithia? A pause. Aye, we assumed Artemis would suffice. You resist the urge to sigh. Artemis is the virgin goddess of childbirth, which is ironic enough on its own, like asking someone who's never driven a chariot to teach chariot racing. But Eileithia is the specialist, the goddess who specifically eases labour pains and guides babies through the birth canal. Skipping her is like showing up to a symposium and only honouring Dionysus while ignoring the host. Technically you can do it, but it's rude. We should pray to Eileithia now, you say diplomatically. Just to be thorough, you pull a small clay figurine from your bugger crude representation of the goddess with her arms raised. It's nothing fancy, cost you maybe 2 obols at the market, but it serves the purpose. You set it on a small table someone's dragged into the birthing room and arrange a quick altar, a small dish of honey, a handful of barley grains, and one of those amulets from your bag. Myrrhine, you say gently, can you repeat after me? Between contractions, when you can focus. She nods weakly. You wait for the current wave of pain to crest and recede, then begin the prayer. Your voice is steady, practiced. You've said these words dozens of times in dozens of rooms just like this one. Eileithyia, daughter of Zeus and Hera, goddess who knows the pain of women. You pause, and Myrrhine whispers the words after you, her voice thin and trembling. Come to me in my hour of need. Guide my child safely into the light. Ease my suffering and grant me strength. Here's a quirky bit of religious history. Some women pray to Eileithyia to hasten labour, while others pray to her to delay it if they're not ready. The goddess apparently has a sense of timing and can speed up or slow down contractions at will, which makes her either very powerful or very confused about her job description. You've always wondered how she decides which prayers to answer when 2 women in Athens are probably praying for opposite things at the exact same moment. The mother-in-law has joined in the prayer now, her voice stronger. The slave girl mumbles along uncertainly. Even Myrrhine, in the grip of labour, is trying to form the words. There's something oddly moving about it, this communal appeal to divine mercy, this shared vulnerability. When the prayer ends, you pull out your fumigation materials. This is part medicine, part ritual, and part practical air freshening because birthing rooms get ripe fast. You have dried lavender, rosemary, and frankincense, the frankincense being the expensive item that you only use for clients who can afford it. Callias can definitely afford it. You crumble the herbs into a small bronze censer and set it near one of the oil lamps, letting the flame catch. Smoke begins to curl upward, carrying the sharp sweet scent of burning resin and herbs. The room's atmosphere shifts. Immediately something about the smoke makes the space feel more sacred, more set apart from the ordinary world outside. Breathe it in, you tell Myrrhine. Deep breaths. The smoke carries prayers to the gods. Does fumigation actually help labour progress? Historians still argue whether the herbs used in ancient Greek birthing rituals had genuine pharmacological effects. Rosemary and lavender are both considered calming, and frankincense smoke might have mild analgesic properties, but you suspect the real benefit is psychological. The smoke signals that something important is happening, that higher powers are being invoked, that this suffering has meaning and purpose. Another contraction hits, and Myrrhine's prayer dissolves into a cry. You're beside her instantly, one hand on her lower back, applying firm pressure to the spot where you know the pain concentrates during labour. It's a technique you learned from an Egyptian midwife who passed through Athens years ago, and it works remarkably well for back labour. The baby's pressing on your spine, you explain as you work. This counter-pressure helps. Focus on my hand. Breathe through it. She's panting, moaning, but she's not screaming anymore, which you count as progress. The slave supporting her left side has finally figured out that her job is to be steady and silent, not to make panicked faces. Small victories. When the contraction passes, you check the fumigation it's still smoking nicely. You add a pinch more frankincense because the mother-in-law is watching, and you want to demonstrate that you're taking the spiritual aspects seriously. Rich families pay attention to these details, and word of mouth is everything in your profession. Tell me about your mother's births, you say to Myrrhine, partly to distract her and partly because family birth history actually matters. Difficult labours sometimes run in families' narrow pelvises, unusually large babies, tendency to hemorrhage. The information helps you anticipate problems. She had 6 children, Myrrhine gasps. 5 lived, she said. She said labour got easier after the first. She's right. First babies take their time figuring out the route. They're tourists, stopping to admire the scenery. You're rewarded with a tiny, exhausted smile. Second babies know where they're going and get there faster. This is actually true, and it's one of the few reassuring facts about childbirth. First babies blaze the trail. Subsequent babies follow the established path, though you don't mention that sometimes the first baby does so much damage that subsequent births come with their own complications. No need to burden her with that knowledge right now. The mother-in-law is fussing with the lamps, adjusting them to cast better light. You approve good lighting is crucial, and you'll need to see clearly when the baby actually crowns. You make a mental note of where everything is. Your tools, clean cloths, water basin, swaddling strips. Organization now prevents chaos later. How are you feeling, you ask Mirine. Like I'm being split in half, she says honestly. That's accurate. No point in lying. But you're doing beautifully. The prayers are said, the goddesses are listening, and your baby is on their way. We're ready for them. The smoke continues to rise, carrying its fragrant burden toward the ceiling beams. Outside, you can hear Athens going about its daily business vendors shouting, carts rattling, the city's thousand small sounds. But in here, in this smoke-wreathed room, time feels different. Suspended, sacred. You settle back on your heels, hands ready, mind focused. The ritual preparations are complete. Now comes the work. Another contraction builds, and you watch Murine's body respond with the kind of focused attention that comes from years of practice. Her abdomen tightens like a drawn bowstring, the muscles bunching and releasing in waves you can actually see through the thin fabric of her chiton. This is uterine contraction in action, though, of course, the ancient Greeks don't call it that. They have their own theories about what's happening inside a laboring woman's body, and some of them are almost correct, while others are creative. Why does it keep stopping and starting? Marine gasps when the contraction releases her. Why can't it just happen all at once? This is actually a great question, and one that Greek medical theory has spent considerable effort trying to answer. You settle into teaching Moda partly because she deserves an explanation, and partly because distraction helps laboring women cope. Your womb is a muscle, you begin, which is something the Hippocratic texts get right. It contracts and relaxes like your arm when you lift something heavy, except instead of lifting, it's opening and pushing. The contractions come in waves because the womb needs rest between each effort, just like you'd need to rest between lifting heavy amphoras. This is the mainstream medical understanding you've absorbed from years of listening to physicians drone on about their theories at public lectures. Here's the thing. Hippocratic medicine actually understands quite a bit about the mechanical process of labor. The texts describe the cervix opening, the contractions pushing the baby downward, the role of the membranes and amniotic fluid. For ancient medicine, this is remarkably accurate observation. But then they veer off into humour theory, and things get weird. The contractions are also driven by your body's humours, you continue, because this is what you're expected to say, and because patients find it reassuring when you sound like you know the theory. Blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. They all need to be in balance for labour to progress smoothly. If your humours are out of balance, labour can stall or become too violent. Does humour imbalance actually affect labour? Historians still argue whether Hippocratic medical theory had any basis in physiological reality or was pure theoretical nonsense dressed up in fancy language. You've noticed that women who are well, fed, rested and not terrified tend to have easier labours than women who are starving, exhausted and panicking, so maybe there's something to the idea of bodily balance. Or maybe correlation isn't causation and you're seeing patterns where none exist. Right now, you tell Marine, your body is producing more blood and heat to fuel the contractions. That's why you're sweating and feel like you're burning up. The heat makes the womb more pliable, helps it open. Some physicians think you can speed up labour by warming the mother's body, which is why we sometimes use hot compresses or heated stones. This is partially true warmth, does seem to help some women relax, and relaxation helps labour progress. But you've also seen women labouring in cold rooms and hot rooms with equal success. So you suspect heat is less important than the medical texts claim. Still, it gives you something to do, a way to feel useful when mostly you're just waiting for biology to run its course. The mother-in-law interrupts. Should we give her hot wine? My mother swore by hot wine during labour. After the baby comes, you say firmly. Wine during active labour is a terrible idea. It can make women dizzy and uncoordinated exactly when they need to be focused and alert. But you've learned to frame your refusals diplomatically. Right now, her body needs all its attention on opening and pushing. Wine can wait for celebration. Here's a quirky bit of ancient obstetric theory. Some physicians believe that labour pain is caused by the baby actively fighting to escape the womb, essentially karate chopping its way out with tiny fists and feet. The idea is that the infant is a conscious being desperate for air and freedom, battling against the confining walls of the uterus. It's almost poetic, this vision of the baby as a miniature warrior, except it's also completely wrong about how labour actually works. The baby isn't fighting anything. It's being squeezed out by muscular contractions it has no control over. But you don't correct this theory when patients mention it, because sometimes the image of their baby as a fighter gives them courage. Another contraction hits, stronger this time. Miriam cries out and bears down instinctively, her face flushing deep red with effort. You can see the baby's head descending, not visible yet, but you can tell from the way she's pushing, the change in her breathing, the way gravity and muscular force are combining to move this infant toward the outside world. Good, you encourage. That's exactly right. When you feel that pressure, push with it. Your body knows what it's doing. It doesn't feel like it knows, she sobs. I promise it does. Here's what's happening right now. Your womb is contracting from the top down, like squeezing honey from a jar. Each squeeze pushes the baby a little further through the opening. Between contractions, the baby rests and so do you. Then we do it again. Eventually, after enough squeezes, the baby runs out of womb to sit in and has to come out. This explanation is simultaneously accurate and completely inadequate for describing the overwhelming physical experience of labour, but it's the best you can do with the vocabulary available to you. Modern medicine would talk about effacement and dilation and station, but you work with what you have, observation, experience, and medical theories that are half empirical evidence and half philosophical speculation. You check her progress again between contractions, your oiled fingers sliding in easily now, finding the cervix almost completely dilated, the baby's head descending nicely. The position is better than it was an hour ago. The baby has rotated, tucked their chin, found the right angle. Sometimes they figure it out on their own. This baby, thankfully, is proving to be a quick learner. Almost there, you murmur. Maybe another hour, maybe 2. You're so close, Miriam. She's crying again, but differently nowless fear, more exhaustion mixed with desperate hope. Her hair is completely soaked with sweat, her chitin clinging to her body. The slave is offering water between contractions, and you approve. Hydration matters, even if the Hippocratic texts don't spend much time discussing it. Why do some women have easy births and others suffer for days? The mother-in-law asks. It's a reasonable question, one you've pondered yourself. Narrow hips, large babies, baby in wrong position, you list off. First birth versus later births. The path is already established after the first child. The mother's overall health, whether she's eaten well during pregnancy, her age. Every young women and older women tend to have more difficulties. And sometimes you pause, sometimes we just don't know. Some labours are harder for reasons we can't see or explain. This is the honest answer, and it's both satisfying and frustrating. For all the elaborate theories about humours and heat and womb mechanics, sometimes birth is just difficult, and you can't predict why. Experience teaches you to recognize warning signs, but it also teaches you humility. Every birth is different. Every woman's body responds uniquely. The best you can do is observe, assist, and adapt. Miriam grips the birthing stool handles as another contraction builds. You place your hand on her knee, grounding her, reminding her she's not alone in this. The smoke from the sensor continues to curl upward. The lamps flicker. The city sounds drift in from outside, distant and irrelevant. Here, in this room, in this moment, nothing exists except the ancient, eternal work of bringing a human being into the world. For the next hour, labour progresses in that grinding, relentless way that makes time feel both endless and weirdly compressed. Contractions are coming every few minutes now, each one stronger than the last, and Mirin has moved past coherent speech into the realm of primal sounds, groans, grunts, and occasionally a sharp cry that probably has Callias out in the courtyard wondering if his wife is dying. She's not, but she definitely sounds like she thinks she might be. You've been monitoring the baby's descent, and everything is progressing normally, which is great for the baby, less great for Mirine, who is discovering that normal labour still hurts like being trampled by a sacred bull. The baby's head is pressing down hard now, creating that overwhelming pressure that makes women swear they need to empty their bowels. They don't, usually. It's just the baby's skull pressing on the rectum, but try explaining anatomy to someone in transition and they'll tell you exactly where you can stick your educational lecture. I have to. Marine is squirming on the birthing stool, her face contorted. That's the baby, you assure her. Not your bowels. I know it feels the same, but trust me, it's just pressure from the head descending. Very normal. Nothing about this is normal, she shrieks, and honestly, fair point. Another contraction builds, and this one is different. You can see it in her face. The pain has intensified to a new level, the kind that makes women forget their own names. She's bearing down hard, her whole body engaged in the effort, but you can tell from the way she's tensing that she's fighting it too, caught between the instinct to push and the instinct to resist, because pushing makes it hurt worse. You're fighting yourself, you observe. Let me help. You move quickly, reaching for pressure points you learned from that Egyptian midwife who passed through Athens 5 years ago. She was old, weathered, and knew tricks you'd never seen in Greek medical practice. This particular technique involves pressing specific points on the lower back and sacrum while the contraction peaks, supposedly redirecting pain and helping the baby rotate. Hold still, you tell Marine, though that's like asking fire not to burn. You find the spots to small hollows at the base of her spine, just where the sacrum curves. You press hard with your thumbs, applying steady, firm pressure through the contraction. The effect is immediate. Mirine's scream tapers off into a lower moan, and while she's still clearly in pain, something has shifted. Don't stop, she gasps. Whatever you're doing, don't stop. I won't, you promise, though your thumbs are already starting to ache. You'll have bruises tomorrow from this, but that's the job. Here's a quirky bit of cross-cultural medical history. Egyptian midwifery techniques were actually quite sophisticated and had influenced Greek practice more than most Greek physicians wanted to admit. The Egyptians had been delivering babies for thousands of years before Athens was even a city, and they'd figured out things about positioning, pressure points, and pain management that Greek medical texts were only starting to describe. That Egyptian midwife taught you more in 3 conversations than you learned from a year of listening to Hippocratic lectures. The contraction passes and you release the pressure, giving your thumbs a rest. Mirine slumps forward, panting. The slave supporting her looks impressed, like you just performed magic. You didn't. You just know where to press and when. The baby's position is good, you tell Mirine, but I think we need to change yours. The birthing stool is excellent, but sometimes movement helps things along. Can you stand? I can't. I can barely. You can. I'll help you. You gesture to the slave. Support her other side. We're going to walk. Walking during active labour is controversial. Historians still argue whether ancient Greek midwives encouraged movement or insisted on women staying still on birthing stools. In your experience, different positions work for different women, and right now Mary needs to move. The baby is slightly asynclitic tilted to one side, and walking can help them rotate into a better position. You and the slave haul Myrine to her feet. She's wobbly, her legs shaking, but you've got her. Small steps, you instruct. We're just walking around the room. Slow circles. Let gravity help pull the baby down. You've barely made it 3 steps when another contraction hits. Mirine stops, gripping both you and the slave like her life depends on it. Her knees buckle slightly, but you hold her upright, taking her weight. Breathe through it, you murmur. Sway if it helps. Rock your hips. She does, instinctively, her body finding a rhythm, a slight side-to-side sway that probably looks ridiculous but feels right to her. Women in labour sometimes discover movements that ease pain, and you've learned to encourage whatever works. You've seen women squat, kneel, lean against walls, hang from ropes tied to ceiling beams. Birth isn't a one-position-fits-all situation, despite what the medical texts suggest. When the contraction releases, you continue the slow circuit of the room. Past the fumigation sensor, past the altar with Ilethia's figurine, past the pile of clean linens you prepared. The mother-in-law watches from the doorway, wringing her hands but staying mercifully quiet. Better? You ask Marine. Different, she admits. Still terrible, but different. You'll take it. Different is better than worse, and right now you're managing a situation that could easily spiral. The baby needs to rotate maybe another 15 degrees, and walking combined with those pressure points might do it. Might. Birth is as much art as science, and sometimes you're working on educated guesses rather than certainties. 3 more circuits of the room, 3 more contractions. You're maintaining that pressure point technique through each one, and Mirine has stopped fighting the urge to push. She's working with her body now instead of against it, which is exactly what you need. On the 4th circuit, you feel her stop mid-step. Something changed, she says, her eyes wide. It feels, I feel. You know that feeling. It's the sensation of the baby dropping, rotating, settling into the final position. You guide her back to the birthing stool. Quickly, no, time for another lap. Sit, you command, now. She collapses onto the stool and you're between her legs immediately, checking. Yes, the baby's head is right there, positioned perfectly now, pressing against the perineum. You can feel the skull through the stretching tissue, and if you had to guess, you'd say you're maybe 20 minutes from crowning. You did it, you tell her. The baby's in position. Next stage is the hard part, but also the last part. The last part, she repeats, desperate for hope. The last part, you confirm. Now we push this baby out into the world. Her eyes fill with tearless exhaustion, relief, determination, all mixed together. The mother-in-law has stepped into the room fully now, sensing the shift in energy. Even the slave looks focused, ready. You take a clean cloth and wipe your hands, then reach for the olive oil. Time to prepare the perineum to help it stretch without tearing if possible. This is delicate work, the kind that requires steady hands and good timing. Next contraction, you tell Marine, we push for real. Small pushes, controlled, not explosively. We're helping your baby ease out, not launching them into the room like a catapult. She laughs, actually laughs, a small, desperate sound, but it's something. Humour in the birthing room is worth its weight in gold. It means hope hasn't completely abandoned her. The contraction builds, and you feel it through your hands on her knees, through the way her whole body gathers itself for effort. This is it, the final stage, the moment when all your training, all your experience, all your prayers to Artemis and Ilethia either pay off or don't. Push, you tell her, gentle and steady. Good, that's perfect. Keep going, and she does. The next contraction hits, and Mirine bears down, her face turning crimson with effort. You can see the baby's head beginning to bulge against the perineum just. The slightest dome of pressure, not visible yet, but you can feel it under your oiled fingers. This is the moment that separates experienced midwives from amateurs. Too much coaching, and you'll exhaust her before the baby's even close. Too little, and she might push so hard she tears herself apart. Good, you murmur, one hand supporting her perineum, feeling the tissue stretch under your palm. Small push, just like that. Don't hold your breath, breathe through it. Push like you're trying to pass the world's most stubborn bowel movement, not like you're competing in the Olympic Games. The contraction peaks and releases. Mirine gasps, her head falling forward. Sweat drips from her chin onto her lap. You reach for more olive oil, warming it between your palms before applying it generously to the stretching tissue. The oil helps not magically, but mechanically, reducing friction as the baby's head presses outward. Here's a mainstream historical fact. Ancient Greek midwives were obsessed with preventing perineal tears, and with good reason. A bad tear could lead to infection, chronic pain, or fistulas that would plague a woman for the rest of her life. The Hippocratic texts mention various oils and unguents for this purpose, with olive oil being the standard. Some midwives swore by more exotic preparation soil infused with rose petals, or mixtures containing goose fat and honey butt. You've found that plain olive oil works just as well and costs significantly less. Another contraction builds, faster than the last one. They're coming hard and close now, the body's final push to evict its tenant. Mirine doesn't even wait for your instruction. She's bearing down instinctively, her body taking over where conscious thought fails. And there it is. The baby's head begins to crown. You can see it now, just the smallest circle of wet, dark hair visible at the perineum's opening. It's simultaneously the most ordinary and most miraculous thing you've ever witnessed, and you've witnessed it hundreds of times. Every single birth, this moment makes your heart race. Stop pushing, you command sharply. Pant, like a dog. Like a dog. Don't push, just pant. Mirine looks at you like you've lost your mind. Her body is screaming at her to push, every instinct demanding she bear down, and you're telling her to pant like a dog? But she trusts she's too exhausted to argue when she starts panting, short, shallow breaths that sound ridiculous and probably feel worse. This is the critical moment. The baby's head is stretching the perineum to its absolute limit, and if Mirine pushes too hard or too fast, the tissue will tear, possibly badly. What you need is slow, controlled stretching. You need the head to ease out gradually, giving the tissue time to accommodate. Your hands are working constantly now. One hand supports the perineum, applying gentle counterpressure to prevent it from tearing. The other hand is on the baby's head, controlling the speed of emergence. You can feel the skull bones. They're soft, overlapping slightly from the journey through the pelvis. This is called moulding, though the Greeks don't have that specific term. They just know that babies' heads can compress and reshape to fit through tight spaces, which is both brilliant design and slightly disturbing if you think about it too hard. Small push now, you tell her. Tiny, like you're breathing the baby out, not forcing them. She pushes gently and you guide the baby's head forward. More hair becomes visible, dark and wet, matted against the skull. Then the forehead. The baby's face is still tucked down, chin to chest, which is exactly how it should be. You're supporting the perineum with both hands now, stretching it carefully over the emerging head like you're pulling a tight tunic over a melon. Here's a quirky bit of ancient obstetric practice. Some midwives believed that talking to the baby during crowning would encourage them to emerge more easily. You'd literally lean down and speak to the crowning head, welcoming them to the world, promising them their mother's milk and the warmth of sunlight. Does this work? Obviously the baby can't hear you. Ears are probably still full of amniotic fluid and they're busy being compressed through a space that seems impossibly small. But it calms the mother, and sometimes that's what matters. Come on, little one, you murmur, more to Mirine than to the baby. Almost here, your mother's waiting for you. The next push, and suddenly the head is halfway out. You can see the baby's face, now eyes squeezed shut, features squished and purple, covered in vernix and blood. Beautiful and alien all at once. Every baby looks like this, like a tiny old person who's had a very rough day, but new mothers never believe you when you warn them. Don't push, you command again. Pant. Let me work. Your hands are moving with practiced precision, checking for the umbilical cord around the neck. This is crucial. If the cord is wrapped too tightly, it can strangle the baby during delivery. Your fingers probe gently, sliding around the emerging neck, feeling for yes. There it is. The cord looped once around the neck, but loose enough. Thank the gods. You can work with loose. Cord around the neck. you announce calmly, because panicking helps no one. It's fine, not tight. Next push, we're delivering the head completely. The mother-in-law gasps from the doorway. Maureen's eyes go wide with fear. Is the baby? The baby is fine, you say firmly. This happens all the time. Babies like to play with their cords in the womb. They grab them, wrap themselves up like they're practicing to be sailors. We just unwrap them after the head is out. Simple. This is actually true. Historians still argue about exactly how common nuchal cords were in ancient times, but in your experience, maybe 1 in 3 or 4 babies has the cord wrapped somewhere. Most of the time, it's not a problem. Sometimes it is. You won't know which until the head is fully delivered. Another contraction, another push, and the head slides free with a gush of fluid. You support it with both hands, the skull fitting perfectly in your palms. The baby's face is pointing downward, toward the floor, which is normal. They'll rotate in a moment to align the shoulders with the pelvic opening. Heads out, you announce, and the room erupts in excited murmuring. But you're not celebrating yet. The head is the easy part, relatively speaking. Shoulders are what get tricky. You work quickly, using a clean cloth to wipe the baby's face, clearing the nose and mouth of fluid so they can breathe when they fully emerge. Then you check the cord again. Still loose, still manageable. You slip it gently over the baby's head, unwrapping them from their self-imposed tangle. The baby's head rotates now, turning to the side, realigning with the shoulders still inside. This is called restitution, and it's one of those miraculous automatic processes that human bodies just do. You don't have to tell the baby to rotate. They just know. 1 more big push, you tell Marine. Maybe 2. Shoulders are coming. You're almost done. She's crying, laughing, gasping all at once. Her hands grip the birthing stool so hard you're worried she'll splinter the wood. The slave is crying too, caught up in the emotion. Even the mother-in-law has tears streaming down her face. You position your hands ready to guide the shoulders out. This is where you earn your fee. Shoulders delivered wrong can get stuck, can tear the mother catastrophically, can injure the baby. Shoulders delivered right slide out, smooth as oil. The contraction builds. Mirine pushes. You apply gentle downward traction to help the anterior shoulder emerge, then upward to free the posterior shoulder, and suddenly the baby slithers out in a rush of blood and fluid, landing in your waiting hands. For 1 eternal second, the baby doesn't breathe. They're limp in your hands, silent, skin-tinged blue-purple, and your heart drops into your stomach. This is the moment every midwife dreads, the delivery that goes perfectly until it doesn't. The baby who comes out still and quiet instead of squalling with outrage at being evicted from their warm, dark home. But you've done this before. You flip the baby face down across your forearm, head lower than their body, and give their back 3 firm pats, not gentle, not tentative, but solid thumps designed to clear fluid from their airways and announce that the outside world doesn't coddle anyone. The baby jerks, coughs, and then thank every god in the Greek pantheon lets out a furious, indignant wail that echoes off the walls. The room erupts. Murine is sobbing with relief. The mother-in-law is praising Eilifia. The slave is laughing and crying simultaneously. Even you feel that rush of pure joy mixed with adrenaline that comes with every successful birth, no matter how many you've attended. The baby is alive, breathing, screaming their tiny lungs out, and that's all that matters in this moment. It's a boy, you announce, because of course everyone wants to know immediately. You can see Mirine's face, transform relief mixed with something else. Boys are valued in Athens, preferred, celebrated. A son means security for her position in the household, means Callias will be pleased, means her suffering has produced the culturally appropriate result. It shouldn't matter this much, but it does, and you can see the weight of that knowledge in her exhausted smile. You lay the baby on a clean cloth on the floor. He's still connected to the umbilical cord, which is pulsing with blood, thick and ropey, snaking back up into Myrine. The cord is still transferring blood and oxygen from the placenta to the baby, and you've learned through experience to wait a few moments before cutting it. Let the baby get every drop of blood they're owed. Some midwives cut immediately, but you've noticed that babies who get those extra moments of cord blood tend to pinker up faster and cry more vigorously. The baby boy is covered in vernix, that white, waxy coating that protects skin in the womb mixed with blood and amniotic fluid. He's scrunched and red and absolutely perfect in that weird alien way that all newborns are perfect. His eyes are squeezed shut, his tiny fists are clenched, and he's howling like someone just committed a terrible injustice against him, which, from his perspective, someone probably has. Here's a mainstream historical fact. Ancient Greek midwives conducted immediate health assessments of newborns using a systematic approach that's actually fairly sophisticated. You're running through your mental checklist right now, even as you're reaching for your bronze blade. 10 fingers, 10 toes, you do a quick count. Yes, all present and accounted for. Both eyes, both ears, mouth properly formed with no obvious cleft. Spine straight when you run your finger down his back. Anus present and properly positioned. You learnt to check this after one horrible case where it wasn't and the baby died within days. Genitals normal for a male infant. You check his muscle tone by observing how he moves. She's squirming, kicking, arms flailing. Good reflexes, good strength. His breathing is regular now, chest rising and falling, the blue tinge fading to pink as oxygen saturates his blood. No obvious deformities, no signs of the conditions that would make Callias consider exposure. This baby will be accepted by his father, will be raised in this household, will become a citizen of Athens. The cord has stopped pulsing. Time to cut. Bring me the wine, you tell the slave, and she hurries over with the cup you'd requested earlier. You pour a generous amount over your bronze blade, sterilizing it. At least, that's the theory. The Hippocratic texts recommend wine for cleaning wounds and instruments, claiming it prevents corruption and infection. Does it work? Historians still argue whether ancient antiseptic practices had genuine antimicrobial effects or were just ritual, but you've seen fewer infections when you use wine versus water, so you're a believer. You measure out 2 finger widths from the baby's belly and tie off the cord with a clean linen thread, knotting it tightly. Then you measure another finger width toward the placenta and tie a second knot. The section of cord between the 2 knots is what you'll cut far enough from the baby that there's no risk of the tie slipping and causing hemorrhage, close enough that you're not leaving an unnecessarily long stump. Here's a quirky bit of umbilical cord lore. Some midwives save and dry the severed cord, then grind it into powder that's supposed to have medicinal properties. Cord powder mixed with honey is allegedly good for infant colic, teething pain, and a dozen other childhood ailments. You've never tried it because the whole thing seems unhygienic at best and magical thinking at worst, but you know colleagues who swear by it. Ancient medicine is full of these practices that blend empirical observation with wishful thinking. You position the blade between the 2 knots and cut cleanly. The cord separates easily, blood welling briefly at the cut ends before the knots hold. The baby is now truly separate from his mother for the first time in 9 months, an independent being, responsible for his own breathing and circulation. It's a transition that happens in seconds, but marks the most fundamental boundary of human existence. You quickly inspect both cut ends. The baby's stump looks good, not bleeding, tied securely. You'll fold his swaddling to avoid putting pressure on it, and it should dry and fall off within a week or so, leaving the depression that marks every human as having once been connected to someone else. The mother's end of the cord dangles down, still attached to the placenta that hasn't delivered yet. That's your next task, but first, the baby needs attention. You lift him carefully. He's still screaming, which is exactly what you want, and carry him to the basin of wine water you'd prepared earlier. The mixture is 1 part wine to 3 parts water, warmed to body temperature. This is standard newborn bathing practice, and it serves multiple purposes. It cleans off the vernix and blood. The wine supposedly protects against infection, and the process gives you another opportunity to examine the baby thoroughly. First bath, you announce, and lower him gently into the basin. He screams louder if that's possible, limbs thrashing in protest. You support his head with one hand and use the other to wipe him down quickly but thoroughly. As you clean him, you're still assessing skin tone, breathing effort, muscle strength. Everything looks good. This is a healthy, vigorous infant who's making his displeasure with the outside world abundantly clear. The mother-in-law has appeared at your elbow with the swaddling cloths. "Is he perfect?" she asks, trying to see around you. "He's perfect," you confirm, and you mean it. By ancient Greek standards of infant health, this boy has passed every test. He'll live, probably. Infant mortality is high enough that you never make promises, but this one has better odds than most. You lift him from the bath, wrap him in a clean linen cloth to dry him, and finally, you can bring him to his mother. Mirani's arms are already reaching, tears streaming down her face. You place the baby on her chest, skin to skin, and watch as she instinctively curves her body around him, protective and fierce. The baby's cries quiet almost immediately, soothed by the familiar sound of her heartbeat. "Your son," you tell her softly. She looks down at him with an expression you've seen hundreds of times, but that never gets old. Wonder mixed with exhaustion, mixed with a love so fierce it's almost frightening. Behind you, you can hear Callias's voice from the courtyard, asking anxiously about his wife and child. The mother-in-law rushes out to tell him the good news. Soon he'll come in to inspect his son, to decide whether to accept the child into the family or reject him. But that's not your concern right now. Right now, you have a placenta to deliver, and that's where things can still go dangerously wrong. While Mirin cradles her newborn son, you're focused on the umbilical cord still snaking from between her legs, pulseless now but attached to the placenta that remains inside her uterus. This is the stage that kills women. Not the dramatic bleeding during delivery, not the baby getting stuckets. The seemingly simple task of delivering the afterbirth that can turn a successful birth into a funeral within days. "How long until the afterbirth comes?" the mother-in-law asks, hovering anxiously. "Could be 5 minutes, could be 30, you tell her, keeping your voice calm even though you're watching Merine carefully for signs of trouble. "We wait for the signs that it's separating, then help it along. Rushing this is how women die. This is the truth, and it's worth repeating. Retained placenta or retained placental fragments are death sentences. If even a small piece of placenta stays in the uterus, it will rot. The rot will turn septic. The infection will spread through the blood. The woman will develop fever, chills, abdominal pain, and within a week she'll be dead, leaving her newborn motherless. You've seen it happen. Every midwife has. It's the nightmare that haunts your profession. So you wait, watching for the signs. The cord will lengthen as the placenta detaches and descends. Murine's uterus will contract. You can feel it by pressing gently on her abdomen, that hard ball of muscle shrinking down now that its occupant is vacated. There might be a small gush of blood as the placenta separates from the uterine wall. These are your cues. "Talk to your son," you tell Murine gently. The sound of your voice helps your body finish its work. This is partially true. The emotional connection, the release of whatever humours the Greeks believe govern milk production and uterine contraction, seems to help the afterbirth process along. Modern science would talk about oxytocin release during bonding, but you work with what you know. Mothers who hold and nurse their babies tend to deliver placentas faster and with fewer complications. Murine is murmuring to the baby, stroking his tiny head with one finger. The boy has stopped crying and is making those weird snuffling sounds newborns make, rooting around instinctively for the breast. You make a mental note to help her with first nursing after the placenta is delivered. First-time mothers never know what they're doing, and babies are surprisingly bad at latching despite 9 months of preparation. You feel Myronine's abdomen pressing gently above the pubic bone. The uterus is contracting nicely, firm and round. Good. A soft, boggy uterus at this stage means hemorrhage risk. You've got herbs in your bag that can help stimulate contractions if needed, but so far her body is doing what it should. "I feel something," Murine says suddenly. "Pressure, like another contraction but smaller. That's the placenta separating," you confirm. "Don't push yet. Let me check." You examine the cord. It's lengthened by maybe 3 finger widths, hanging lower than before. This is the sign you've been waiting for. The placenta has detached and is sitting in the birth canal, ready to be delivered. Now comes the delicate part. Here's a mainstream historical fact. Hippocratic medical texts specifically warn against pulling on the umbilical cord to extract the placenta, noting that this can cause the cord to snap, leaving the placenta trapped inside where it will corrupt and poison the blood. This is actually correct aggressive. Cord traction can tear the cord, turn a straightforward delivery into a medical emergency, and potentially cause uterine inversion where the entire organ turns inside out. That last complication kills women fast and horribly, and you've heard of it happening but thankfully never witnessed it yourself. Instead, you use controlled cord traction combined with uterine massage. One hand goes on Maureen's abdomen, pressing down and back to support the uterus. The other hand grasps the cord, firmly, not yanking, not pulling hard, just maintaining steady, gentle traction. Think of it like coaxing a reluctant cat out from under furniture. Force doesn't work, but patient encouragement does. Small push, you tell Maureen. Gentle, like you're sighing the afterbirth out. She bears down softly, and you feel the placenta begin to move. You maintain that steady traction on the cord, your other hand still supporting her uterus through her abdominal wall. The placenta emerges slowly first, the glistening dark red mass of tissue, then the membranes trailing behind it like translucent curtains. This is the moment of truth. The placenta needs to come out intact, whole, complete, with all its membranes attached. You guide it into a basin, being careful not to let it tear or fragment. Once it's fully delivered, you examine it with the focused intensity of a general inspecting his troops before battle. The placenta is roughly circular, about the size of a dinner plate, and looks disturbingly like a giant piece of liver, which functionally it kind of is an organ specifically grown to support the baby, now discarded like yesterday's garbage. But this garbage tells you crucial information. You spread it out in the basin, checking the maternal side, first the side that was attached to Maureen's uterus. It should look like raw meat with distinct sections called cotyledons. You count them, checking for missing pieces. The surface should be complete, with no chunks torn away. Yes, it looks whole. Good. Then you flip it to examine the fetal side, smooth and shiny, covered with the baby's blood vessels branching out in a tree-like pattern. You trace these vessels with your finger, making sure they all lead back to where the cord attaches. No broken vessels trailing off to nowhere, which would indicate missing tissue. Finally, the membranes. You hold them up to the lamplight, spreading them out. They should form a complete sac, the amnion and chorion layers that held the baby and amniotic fluid. Historians still argue whether ancient midwives understood the dual-layer structure of fetal membranes, but you know from experience that these translucent sheets need to be intact. You're looking for holds, tears, any suggestion that fragments remain inside Maureen. Here's a quirky bit of placental folklore. Some midwives believe the placenta's appearance can predict future fertility. A thick, healthy placenta means the mother will conceive easily again. A thin or oddly shaped placenta suggests future difficulties. You're skeptical of this. You've seen women with beautiful placentas struggle for years to conceive again, and women with weird, lumpy placentas pop out babies annually like clockwork. But clients like hearing these predictions, so you mention them when appropriate. Perfect placenta, you announce, and you genuinely mean it. Completely intact, no fragments retained. The relief in the room is palpable. The mother-in-law exhales heavily. Even Maureen, exhausted and still bleeding, manages a weak smile. This is the moment when everyone can finally relax, when the immediate danger has passed. You checked Maureen's bleeding moderate flow, which is normal. The uterus is contracting down nicely, clamping off the blood vessels where the placenta was attached. You massage her abdomen gently, encouraging further contraction. Her body has done exactly what it needed to do, and barring infection or postpartum hemorrhage in the next few days, she's going to survive this. Well done, you tell her quietly. You and your son both did beautifully. She's crying again, but these are different. Tears, relief, joy, exhaustion, hormones all swirling together. The baby is still nestled against her chest, and you can see him starting to root around more insistently. He's hungry, you observe. Ready to try nursing? Helping a first-time mother nurse is like teaching someone to juggle while they're exhausted, hormonal, and holding a squirming creature who has opinions but can't communicate them. The baby knows he's hungry. Mirai knows she's supposed to feed him, but neither of them has any idea how this is actually supposed to work, and that's where you come in. Support his head with one hand, you instruct, positioning yourself beside Miranine. Now bring him to your breast. Don't lean forward to him. Bring him to you. Yes, like that. The baby is rooting frantically now, mouth open, turning his head side to side, searching for the nipple. Mirine is trying, but she's holding him at an awkward angle, and her breast isn't cooperating. First-time nursing is a comedy of errors, involving two amateurs who are both operating on pure instinct. Use your other hand to support your breast, you say, demonstrating on your own chest. Thumb on top, fingers underneath. Now brush your nipple against his lip. She'll open wide. She does, and the baby's mouth opens like a hungry bird. But she pulls him toward her breast too soon, and he latches onto just the nipple tip, which is exactly what you don't want. Mirine winces. Shallow latch hurts, and it won't get him much milk. Break the latch, you tell her. Slip your finger in the corner of his mouth gently. There. Now let's try again. Third attempt is the charm. The baby opens wide. Miranine brings him in quickly, and suddenly he's latched properly, mouth covering not just the nipple, but a good portion of the areola, his jaw working as he begins to suckle. His little fists are pressed against her breast, and you can hear the small gulping sounds that mean milk is flowing. That's it. You're genuinely pleased. That's a good latch. Does it hurt? It feels strange, Miranine admits. Not painful exactly, just intense. That's normal. The first few days of nursing feel weird. Your body is figuring out how much milk to make. Your nipples are toughening up. By next week, this will feel completely natural. You hope this is true. Sometimes nursing goes smoothly. Sometimes it doesn't, and you end up recommending wet nurses because the mother's milk never comes in properly, or the baby won't latch, or a dozen other complications arise. While the baby nurses, you turn your attention to the practical matters at hand. Callias will be coming in soon to inspect his son. That's the custom, the father's right to examine the newborn and decide whether to accept or reject the child. In theory, any infant with severe deformities or questionable paternity can be exposed, left outside, to die. In practice, most babies are accepted, but the ritual inspection is still performed. You need to make sure this baby is presented properly. Keep nursing him, you tell Mirine. I need to prepare him for his father's inspection. You gather your supplies, clean water, fresh olive oil, soft wool cloths, and the swaddling strips you'd prepared earlier. The baby has been wiped down during his initial bath, but now he needs a thorough cleaning and a proper inspection before his father sees him. Here's a mainstream historical fact. Ancient Greek infant inspection was systematic and based on specific criteria. Fathers looked for physical deformities, signs of weakness, proper formation of all limbs and organs, and sometimes, though this was less openly discussed, they looked for evidence of paternity. A baby who looked nothing like the father or his family might be rejected on suspicion of adultery, though this was rare in respectable households. After the baby has nursed for about 10 minutes, long enough to get some colostrum, that first golden milk that the Greeks believe confers strength and health, you gently take him from Mirine's arms. She protests weakly, but you're firm. He needs to be properly prepared for his father. I'll bring him right back. You lay the baby on a clean wool fleece spread on the floor and begin the detailed inspection you only partially completed earlier. This time you're looking at everything the way a critical father would look. Face first. Eyes, you gently open them, checking that both pupils are present and appear normal. The irises are that dark blue-grey that all newborns have, which will probably change to brown in a few months. No cloudiness, no obvious defects. Nose properly formed, 2 nostrils, septum intact. Mouth whole, slip a clean finger inside, feeling the hard palate. No cleft, which is crucial. A cleft palate makes nursing nearly impossible and usually results in the infant being exposed. Tongue present and mobile, lips intact and symmetric, ears both present, properly positioned, the right size for his head. You've seen babies with tiny malformed ears or ears set too low on the skull. Those children rarely survive past infancy, even if accepted by their fathers. Moving down the body now. Neck no swelling, no masses, good range of motion when you turn his head gently side to side. Chest symmetric, ribs visible beneath the skin but not protruding abnormally. Belly soft, slightly distended as it should be, the umbilical stump tied securely. The belly button will eventually be where that stump falls off, marking him forever as someone who was once connected to another human. Here's a quirky bit of infant anatomy checking. You press gently on his fontanelles, the soft spots on his skull where the bones haven't fused yet. The anterior fontanelle pulses slightly with his heartbeat, which is normal. Some midwives believe you can diagnose various infant ailments by how the fontanelles feel, but you're skeptical. Historians still argue whether ancient medical practitioners understood the purpose of fontanelles or just knew they existed and made up theories about them. Genitals, shoe check again, more carefully this time. Penis present and normal-sized for an infant, urethral opening at the tip where it should be. Testicles descended into the scrotum, both of them, which is important. Undescended testicles can lead to fertility problems later, though that's not usually grounds for rejection. Anusya check again to be absolutely certain. Yes, present and properly positioned. This cannot be emphasized enough. An imperforate anus means the baby can't pass stool and will die within days. Arms and legs. You flex each limb, checking for full range of motion. 10 fingers, 10 toes you count again, because fathers always count. Each finger has a tiny, perfect fingernail. The baby's hands are curled into tight fists, which is normal. You straighten his legs. They're a bit bowed, which all newborns are after being curled in the womb for 9 months. His feet turn inward slightly, also normal. You check for clubfoot, which is a more severe deformity where the foot is twisted at an abnormal angle. His feet look fine, back and spine. You turn him over gently. He protests with a squawk hand. Run your finger down his spine from skull to tailbone. Straight, no gaps, no visible defects. Some babies are born with spina bifida, where the spinal column doesn't close completely. Those infants usually don't survive, and if they do, they're paralyzed. This baby's spine is perfect. Again, you're checking for birthmarks, rashes, anything that might alarm the father. A few small baby acne spots on his nose which will clear up. No port wine stains, no large moles, no signs of jaundice yet, though that can develop in the first few days. His skin is that mottled red-pink of new life, slightly dry and flaky in places where the vernix is worn off. He's perfect, you announce to the room. Healthy, properly formed, strong. The mother-in-law beams. Mironine, exhausted on the birthing stool, manages a weak smile. Now comes the art of presentation. Swaddling a newborn is a skill that looks simple but requires practice. The goal is to wrap the baby's snugly butt, not too tightly in a way that keeps their limbs secure and straight. The Greeks believed that proper swaddling helps shape the infant's body correctly, ensuring straight limbs and good posture as they grow. You're not entirely convinced this is true, but you know that swaddled babies cry less and sleep more, which makes everyone happier. You lay out a square of soft linen pre-washed, boiled and dried in sunlight to ensure cleanliness. Place the baby in the center, on his back. Fold one corner of the fabric across his body, tucking it under his opposite arm. Then fold the bottom corner up over his feet. Then the remaining corner across, creating a neat, secure bundle. The baby is now swaddled, looking like a compact little mummy, just his face visible. He's stopped squirming and appears calmer. The pressure mimics the tight confines of the womb, which newborns apparently find comforting after spending 9 months compressed in limited space. You lift him carefully and carry him to Marine. Your son, ready for his father's inspection. She takes him, tears streaming again. The baby's eyes are closed now, exhausted from his journey into the world. He looks peaceful, perfect, the very image of a healthy Greek newborn ready to be welcomed into his family. Outside, you can hear Callias pacing anxiously. Time to invite him in to meet his son. The mother-in-law hurries to fetch Callias, and moments later he enters the birthing room with the careful steps of a man entering a sacrador, possibly contaminated space. Men don't typically witness birth, and the room still smells of blood, sweat, and the smoky herbs from your fumigation. He looks simultaneously eager and uncomfortable, like someone who desperately wants to see something but isn't sure they'll like what they find. "Your son," Myrine says weakly, holding up the swaddled bundle. Callias approaches, and you watch his face carefully. This is the moment that determines the infant's fate. In theory, the father has absolute authority to accept or reject the child. In practice, rejecting a healthy infant is rare, but it happens. You've seen fathers refuse babies who look too much like the wife's brother instead of the husband, babies born with minor deformities, even babies born at inauspicious times. Once, you delivered twins and the father accepted only one, claiming the household couldn't afford to raise both. That still haunts you. But Callias's face softens immediately when he sees his son. The baby's eyes are open now, that unfocused newborn gaze that doesn't really see anything yet but looks profound anyway. Callias reaches out tentatively, touching one tiny hand with his finger. The baby's fist curls around it reflexively, and you see the exact moment when Callias falls in love. "He's strong," Callias says, his voice thick with emotion. "Look at his grip. Very strong," you confirm, even though that's just the palmar grasp reflex and every healthy newborn has it. But fathers need to believe their sons are exceptional, and who are you to argue with a harmless delusion? Callias performs a cursory inspection, counting fingers and toes, checking the face, nodding approvingly at everything. He's not really looking for defects. He's already decided to accept this child. You can tell. Some fathers inspect with clinical detachment. Callias is inspecting the way people examine a beautiful vase they've already decided to purchase. "He'll be called Hipponikos," Callias announces, "after my father. We'll perform the amphidromia in 7 days. The amphidromia is the official naming ceremony where the father carries the infant around the household hearth, formally introducing the child to the family's protective spirits. It's when the baby gets their name and becomes a recognized member of the household. Until then, the infant exists in a sort of liminal space, alive but not yet fully human in the social sense. Historians still argue about the theological implications of this, but practically speaking, it means you have 7 days to make sure this baby survives before the family makes the emotional and financial investment of a naming ceremony. "A worthy name," you say diplomatically. "Now, your wife needs rest and care. If you'll excuse us, I need to attend to her recovery." Callias nods, reluctant to leave, but understanding that this is women's work now. He backs out of the room, and you hear him immediately begin spreading the good news to whoever's in the courtyard. The household slaves will be gossiping about this Videsa healthy boy, accepted by his father, the bloodline secured. You turn your attention back to Myrine, who's still on the birthing stool and looking like she might collapse at any moment. "Let's get you cleaned up and comfortable. Can you stand?" With help from you and the slave, Myrine shakily gets to her feet. Blood and fluid have pooled beneath the birthing stool more than during the birth itself, which is normal. The uterus is still contracting and expelling leftover blood and clots. You check the amount critically. Heavy bleeding is normal for the first hour after birth. Hemorrhaging is when it doesn't stop, when blood just keeps coming and coming until the woman goes pale and shocky and dies. You need to monitor this carefully. "How do you feel?" you ask, as you help her walk the few steps to a proper bed someone's prepared in the corner. "Like I'd been trampled by a herd of cattle," she says honestly, "and then put back together wrong." Accurate description of childbirth, you agree. The next few days will be uncomfortable. Everything down there is swollen, bruised, and angry at you. But it will heal. You help her lie down on the bed on her side, not her back, because lying flat puts too much pressure on her torn and battered perineum. Once she's settled, you begin the inspection you've been dreading. You need to check for tears. Here's a mainstream historical fact. Ancient Greek midwives were skilled at assessing and treating perineal trauma after birth. The Hippocratic texts describe different degrees of tearing and recommend various treatments ranging from leaving minor tears to heal on their own to stitching severe lacerations. You're hoping Merine falls into the first category. You position the lamps for better light and examine her carefully. There's a small tear, maybe an inch long on the left side of her perineum. It's bleeding slightly but not severely. First degree tear. In modern terms, though, you don't have that classification system. You've seen much worse. This will heal on its own with proper care. You have a small tear, you tell her honestly. Not severe. I'm going to clean it and apply honey to prevent infection. No stitches needed. The relief on her face is palpable. Stitching vaginal tears is excruciating. You have to use fine thread made from sheep intestine and a curved bronze needle. And there's no anesthetic except wine and prayer. Women who need stitching often pass out from the pain, which is honestly a mercy. Merine won't have to endure that. You clean the tear gently with wine water, then apply a generous amount of honey. Honey is one of those ancient remedies that actually works. It has genuine antimicrobial properties, though the Greeks don't understand why. They just know that honey-treated wounds tend to get infected less often than untreated wounds. You'll tell Merine to reapply honey several times daily until the tear closes. Next comes belly binding, one of the post-birth rituals that every culture seems to have discovered independently. You pull out a long strip of linen from your bag about 4 fingers wide and long enough to wrap around Merine's torso several times. This helps your womb shrink back down, you explain as you position the binding strip at her hips. It also supports your back and helps with the cramping you'll feel over the next few days. You wrap the binding snugly around her midsection from hips to just below her breasts, overlapping each layer. Not too tight. She needs to breathe but firm enough to provide support. When you're done, she looks like she's wearing a linen corset. Better? You ask. Actually, yes. She sounds surprised. It feels like everything's being held together. That's exactly what it's doing. You sit back, satisfied with your work. Now, let's talk about what happens next. Here's a quirky bit of postpartum care. Ancient Greek medical theory holds that new mothers are in a vulnerable state for 40 days after birth, during which their bodies are open and susceptible to evil spirits, bad humors, and various ailments. Whether this has any medical basis is debatable, but the result is that new mothers are expected to rest, stay indoors, eat strengthening foods, and avoid strenuous activity for weeks. Honestly, it's not a bad system. Modern medical science would agree that postpartum recovery takes at least 6 weeks, so the Greeks got that part right. You'll bleed for weeks, you tell Merine bluntly. Heavily at first, then tapering off. The blood will change from bright red to brownish to yellowish. This is normal. Use clean wool padding to absorb it, change the padding frequently, and wash with wine water several times daily. She nods, looking overwhelmed. Your breasts will become engorged in 2 or 3 days when your milk comes in fully. They'll be rock hard, hot, and painful. Nurse frequently. That's the only relief. If you develop fever, red streaks on the breast, or severe pain in one spot, send for me immediately. That's infection, and it can kill you. The mother-in-law, who's been listening from the doorway, speaks up. I'll prepare strengthening broths. Chicken, barley, and fennel. That's what my mother gave me after every birth. Perfect, you approve. Fennel is supposed to encourage milk production, and while you're not entirely sure it works, it won't hurt. She needs to eat well and drink plenty of fluids. Nursing takes enormous energy. You turn back to Merine. Rest as much as possible. Don't try to do household work for at least 10 days. Your body has been through trauma. Treat it accordingly. The baby, who's been sleeping peacefully in Merine's arms, begins to stir and fuss. His tiny mouth opens in a yawn that somehow looks both adorable and slightly alien. Time for another nursing session already. As you help position the baby to nurse again, you feel that familiar mix of satisfaction and exhaustion that comes at the end of every birth. You've guided them, both mother and infant, through the most dangerous passage of their lives. Now the real work of survival begins. While the baby nurses and murine dozes between contractions of her shrinking uterus, you find yourself thinking about your own training, how you became the midwife currently sitting in this blood-scented room, confident enough to guide women through birth, but humble enough to know how much can still go wrong. You were 17 when you first attended a birth. Not as the midwife. Obviously, you were barely more than a girl yourself, married less than a year, pregnant with your first child. Your mother-in-law's cousin was labouring, and the household midwife needed someone to fetch supplies, hold lamps, and generally be useful. You'd expected to be terrified. Instead, you were fascinated. The midwife that day was an old woman named Phaenaretes, same name as Socrates' mother, who was also a midwife, which either means it's a popular name among midwives or the universe has a limited imagination. Phaenarete was maybe 60, which made her ancient by most standards, and she'd been catching babies since before you were born. She moved through that birthing room like a general commanding troops, absolutely certain of every decision, every instruction. You watched her examine the labouring woman hands moving with practiced efficiency, reading information from touch that seemed like magic to your inexperienced eyes. You watched her mix herbs, apply oil, position the birthing stool just so. You watched her catch a baby boy who came out screaming and healthy, and you thought, I want to know how to do that. After the birth, while cleaning up, you asked Phaenarete how she learned midwifery. She laughed a dry, crackling sound like old leaves, and said, same way you learn anything worth knowing, slowly, painfully, and by making mistakes you hope don't kill anyone. Here's a mainstream historical fact. Ancient Greek midwives typically learned through apprenticeship, usually starting after they'd given birth to their own children. The theory was that you couldn't teach birth without having experienced it, which makes sense until you remember that male physicians wrote extensive treatises on childbirth without ever delivering a baby themselves. Funny how that works. The apprenticeship could last several years, during which you'd accompany an experienced midwife to births, watch, assist, and gradually take on more responsibilities until you were trusted to deliver babies on your own. Phaenarete took you on as her apprentice after your second child was born. Your first delivery had been relatively easy, a daughter who slid out after 6 hours of labour, attended by Phaenarete herself. Your second was harder, a son who took 2 days to arrive and left you torn and exhausted. But you survived both, which apparently qualified you for training. The apprenticeship was grueling. You attended births at all hours, in all seasons, in households ranging from wealthy to desperately poor. You learned to distinguish normal labour sounds from distress. You learned to examine cervical dilation with just your fingers, to feel for baby positioning through layers of tissue and muscle. You learned which herbs actually worked versus which were expensive placebos. You learned to read women's faces, to know when someone was coping versus when they were spiraling toward panic. Phaenarete taught you the technical skills, but she also taught you the psychology. Half of midwifery is confidence, she'd tell you. Women in labour are terrified. If you show fear, they'll panic. If you show calm certainty, they'll trust you. Even when you're terrified inside, you smile and say everything is normal until it isn't. Here's a quirky bit about midwife training. Some older midwives believed that apprentices should practice examining on pregnant goats before touching human patients. The theory was that goat anatomy is similar enough to human anatomy to be useful training, but different enough that mistakes won't harm people. You never practiced on goats. Phaenarete thought this was nonsense. Ambient, you knew colleagues who swore by it. Historians still argue whether this practice was widespread or just a weird regional custom, but you've definitely heard multiple midwives mention it, so it wasn't entirely made up. Your first solo delivery was terrifying. The labouring woman was a slave in a modest household, her second baby, and Finariti deliberately stayed home telling you, "You're ready!" And if you're not, the only way to find out is to do it alone. Thanks for the vote of confidence, Finariti. You showed up to that birth feeling like an imposter, certain you'd forgotten everything, convinced the baby would die and it would be entirely your fault. But then the woman looked at you with desperate hope, and suddenly your training kicked in. You examined her 7 fingers, dilated, baby well positioned. You coached her through contractions. You caught the babia girl when she emerged squalling and healthy. You delivered the placenta intact. You inspected for tears and found only minor ones. The woman thanked you tearfully, calling you skilled and blessed by Artemis, and you walked home in a daze thinking, "I did that. I actually did that." After that first solo success, Finariti sent you to more births alone. Sometimes she'd appear midway through to check on you, hovering in the background like a watchful spirit. Other times you were completely on your own. You learned to trust your instincts, to make quick decisions, to live with the consequences. You also learned that not every birth has a happy ending. Your third solo delivery, a first-time mother, young, healthy, everything seeming normal ended with the baby stillborn. You'd felt the fetal heartbeat during labour. You'd felt the baby moving. But when the infant emerged, it was limp, silent, its cord wrapped 3 times around its neck so tightly that nothing you did could revive it. The mother's wails haunted your dreams for months. Finariti found you afterward, crying in an alley, and said simply, "This happens, it will happen again. You did nothing wrong." Sometimes babies die, and it's not your fault, but it felt like your fault. It always feels like your fault when you lose one. Over the years, you attended maybe 100 births under Finariti's supervision before she declared your apprenticeship complete. By then, you could diagnose breech presentations by feel alone, could estimate fetal size accurately, knew exactly which herbs to use for hemorrhage versus uterine, atony versus infection. You'd seen twins, triplets, premature babies, overdue babies, babies in every imaginable position and condition. Finariti died 3 years ago peacefully in her sleep, which seemed unfair for someone who'd spent her life attending screaming, "Bloody emergencies!" But at least she didn't suffer. You inherited some of her client list, her reputation, and most valuable of all, her wax tablets full of birth records and case notes. Those tablets are now supplemented with your own observations, creating an unbroken chain of knowledge passed from midwife to midwife to midwife. You've been thinking about taking your own apprentice. Your younger daughter has expressed interest, which would be traditional midwifery, often runs in families. But she's only 13, not yet married, years away from giving birth herself. Maybe in a few years, after she's had her own children, you'll teach her everything Finariti taught you, the secrets whispered in birthing rooms, the tricks no physician knows, the quiet, competent confidence that keeps women alive when their bodies are trying to kill them. Looking at Myrene, now exhausted, torn, bleeding but alive and nursing her healthy son, you feel that familiar satisfaction. This is what Finariti trained you for. This is what you've spent 15 years perfecting. The work is hard, the hours terrible, the pay inconsistent, and the emotional toll enormous. But when it works, when mother and baby both survive, when you walk out of a birthing room knowing you guided them safely through, there's no better feeling in the world. You just hope your daughter understands that when her time comes to learn, you're packing up your tools, preparing to leave Myrene to rest, when the mother-in-law pulls you aside into the courtyard. Her voice drops to a whisper, and you immediately know what's coming. This conversation happens at maybe 1 in every 10 births. The hushed request, the furtive glance around to make sure no one's listening. "My niece," she begins carefully. She's in a difficult situation, unmarried. The father won't acknowledge the child. She's maybe 3 months along. Can you? She doesn't finish the sentence. She doesn't have to. You keep your face neutral, though your stomach tightens. This is the part of midwifery that exists in shadows, the work that's never written about in medical texts, never discussed in polite company, but that desperate women need and midwives quietly provide. Tell her to come see me, you say quietly. Alone, during evening hours when the streets are busy. The mother-in-law nods gratefully and slips you an extra coin payment for a service you haven't yet provided and might not be able to. But the message is clear. She knows you do this work and she needs you to help her niece. Here's the uncomfortable truth about ancient Greek midwifery. You perform procedures that male physicians won't touch, operate in ethical grey zones that would make Hippocrates himself write another treatise condemning you, and carry out tasks that are sometimes legal, sometimes not, and always controversial. The medical establishment pretends you don't do these things. Women know you do, and that's precisely why they come to you instead of to physicians. Start with breech baby infants positioned feet first or bottom first instead of head first. This is a life-threatening complication. Physicians will tell you to let nature take its course, which is code for let the mother and baby both die because I don't know how to fix this. You, on the other hand, have learned to perform external cephalic version manually, manipulating the baby from outside the mother's abdomen, trying to rotate them into the correct position. It doesn't always work. Sometimes the baby won't budge, and you're left delivering breech anyway, which is terrifying. Feet come first, then legs, then body, and finally hopefully the head. But heads can get stuck, and when that happens, the baby suffocates while you're desperately trying to extract them. You've lost babies this way. You've also saved babies this way. The success rate is maybe 60% if you're skilled and lucky. Historians still argue whether ancient Greek midwives actually performed internal podalic version reaching inside the uterus to manually turn a transverse baby into a breech position so you can at least deliver feet first. It's an incredibly dangerous procedure that can rupture the uterus and kill the mother. You've done it exactly twice, both times in situations where the alternative was watching both mother and baby die. Once it worked. Once it didn't, and you still have nightmares about that woman's screams. Then there's manual removal of retained placenta. Remember earlier when we discussed how important it is for the placenta to deliver completely. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes pieces remain stuck to the uterine wall, or the entire placenta refuses to separate. Physicians will bleed the woman with leeches and prescribe herbal remedies, and generally wait for her to die of infection. You reach inside and pull the placenta out manually. This procedure is excruciating for the patient and dangerous for both of you. You're essentially sticking your entire hand into the uterus, feeling for the placental tissue and peeling it away from the wall. Without anesthetic, without antibiotics. Just you, your patient's screens, and the very real possibility that you'll perforate the uterus or introduce infection that kills her within days. But if you don't do it, she dies anyway. So you do it. And you hope your hands are clean enough and your technique is careful enough that she survives. You've performed manual placental removal maybe 15 times in your career. 12 women survived. 3 didn't. You remember all 3 names. And then there are the abortions. This is the work that lives deepest in the shadows. The procedures you absolutely cannot discuss openly because the legal and social consequences are severe. Abortion in Athens occupies a weird legal space. Not explicitly illegal, but not exactly legal either. The husband's consent matters. The stage of pregnancy matters. The reason matters. And crucially, who performs it matters. Here's a quirky bit of legal history. Ancient Greek law was less concerned with abortion itself than with who had authority over the pregnancy. If a married woman sought abortion without her husband's consent, that was a problem. She was destroying his property, essentially. But a pregnant slave whose master wanted the pregnancy terminated? That was fine. The fetus belonged to the master, same as the slave did, and property owners can do what they want with their property. The ethics are horrifying, but that's how the law sees it. You provide abortifacients to maybe a dozen women per year. Usually it's pennyroyal teeth, same herb you use to stimulate contractions during labor, except in much higher doses that can induce miscarriage. Sometimes it's other herbs, tansy, mugwort, rue. You give careful instructions, how much to use, how to brew it, what to expect, when to seek help if something goes wrong. Does it work? Maybe 70% of the time in early pregnancy. Sometimes women drink the tea and nothing happens and they're stuck carrying an unwanted pregnancy to term. Sometimes the miscarriage is incomplete and they come back to you bleeding and feverish and you have to manually remove retained tissue just like you'd remove retained placenta. Sometimes, rarely, thank the gods they hemorrhage and die, and you live with the knowledge that you gave them the herbs that killed them. You also perform manual abortions, though you hate doing it. Dilation and evacuation using bronze instruments. It's risky, painful, and has a significant complication rate. But when a woman is desperate enough when she's pregnant from rape, when another pregnancy might kill her, when she simply cannot bear or afford another child, you do what you can to help. The male physicians condemn this work. The Hippocratic Oath explicitly forbids giving abortifacient drugs, but the Hippocratic Oath was written by men who will never be pregnant, never face the terror of an unwanted pregnancy, never have to choose between bearing a child that might kill them and seeking illegal help. Easy to take the high road when you're not the one whose life is on the line. Here's a mainstream historical fact that's deeply uncomfortable. Ancient Greek society was profoundly ambivalent about women's bodily autonomy. Women were expected to produce legitimate heirs for their husbands, but they had little control over their own reproductive lives. Midwives like you exist in the gap between social expectations and lived reality, providing the services women need even when those services are condemned by the male establishment. You do this work knowing it could destroy you. If the wrong person finds out, you could be prosecuted, fined, or worse, your reputation could be ruined. Your family could be shamed. But women keep coming to you, desperate and frightened, and you keep helping them because someone has to. This is the part of midwifery they don't celebrate. The morally complex, legally ambiguous, ethically fraught work that keeps women alive but exists outside respectable society's approval. You're proud of the healthy babies you deliver, but you're also proud in a quieter, more complicated way of the women you've helped escape pregnancies that would have destroyed them, even if you can never talk about it openly. As you walk back through the courtyard, counting the payment, Callias handed you 3 drachmas, generous for a successful birth yawl, reminded of the strange social position you occupy in Athenian society. You're essential but invisible, trusted but dismissed, legally recognized but socially marginal. It's like being a foundation stone in a building. Everyone depends on you, but no one thinks about you until something goes wrong. Here's the paradox. Athens legally requires midwives to be freeborn citizen women who have given birth. This immediately sets you apart from slaves or foreigners doing similar work. The city recognizes midwifery as a legitimate profession requiring specific qualifications. You can testify in certain legal cases. You're officially registered with local authorities. But despite this legal recognition, you're still just a woman who works with her hands, touching blood and bodies, witnessing things respectable people prefer not to discuss. The philosophers who debate in the agora, they wouldn't be caught dead acknowledging you in public, despite the fact that you probably delivered half of them. The wealthy merchants who control Athens' trade, they need your services desperately, but pay you less than they'd pay a carpenter for a day's work. The male physicians who write medical treatises, they'll cite your observations as if they discovered them themselves, then turn around and claim women are too emotional and irrational to practice real medicine. It's enough to make you laugh, except it's not actually funny. Your legal status comes with obligations that complicate your life considerably. The most significant, you're required by law to report certain births to city officials. Specifically, births of potential citizens' legitimate children born to Athenian parents. The city needs to track its population, ensure the citizenship rolls are accurate, prevent fraud where non-citizens try to pass off children as legitimate. This means that after every birth to a citizen family, you file a report with the local deem officials. Name of father, name of mother, date of birth, sex of child, whether the father accepted the infant. It's bureaucracy, basically, and it turns every birth into paperwork. You've gotten efficient at it, you can file a report in maybe 10 minutes, but it's still annoying. But here's where it gets complicated. You're also legally obligated to report suspected cases of infant exposure or abandonment. If you believe a family is planning to expose a healthy infant for reasons other than severe deformity or economic desperation, you're supposed to inform authorities. In practice, this law is almost never enforced because proving intent is impossible and because city officials have bigger problems to worry about. But technically, you could be held liable if you deliver a baby, the family exposes it, and someone decides you should have reported your suspicions. This creates an impossible ethical position. You witness families making heartbreaking decisions about which children to keep and which to abandon. Sometimes it's economic. They genuinely can't afford another mouth to feed. Sometimes it's eugenic. The baby has a deformity that would make life difficult. Sometimes it's just preference. They wanted a boy and got a girl. You're supposed to report the last category but not the first two. But how are you supposed to distinguish them in real time? So you do what most midwives do. You report nothing unless explicitly required, you mind your own business, and you sleep poorly knowing you've witnessed things that haunt you. Here's a quirky bit of legal reality. Midwives can be called to testify in paternity disputes, inheritance cases, and legal proceedings involving women's health. Your testimony carries weight because you're the expert on female bodies and reproduction. But you can only testify in certain types of cases, and your testimony can be challenged by male physicians who claim superior knowledge despite never having delivered a baby. The legal system simultaneously recognizes your expertise and limits how much authority you're granted to speak on it. You've testified in court exactly 3 times. Once in a paternity case where a woman claimed her child was her husband's, but the family disputed it because the baby was born too early after the marriage. You testified about how pregnancy timing varies, how conception dates are uncertain, how babies can be born healthy at different gestational ages. The court believed you, and the woman's child was recognized as legitimate. You felt good about that one. Once, in an inheritance dispute where the question was whether a widow had been pregnant when her husband died, the family wanted to disinherit her if she wasn't carrying a male heir. You examined her, testified that she was indeed pregnant, and the family grudgingly accepted it. The baby turned out to be a girl, so the inheritance fight continued, but at least you'd done your part. And once in a horrifying case where a woman was accused of infanticide, of deliberately killing her newborn, you had attended the birth. The baby was severely deformed, wouldn't have survived more than days, and the mother had smothered it rather than watch it suffer. You testified about the infant's condition, about the lack of realistic treatment options, about the mercy in ending suffering quickly. The court convicted her anyway, and she was executed. You still feel sick about it. These legal entanglements mean you have to be careful about every birth you attend. Everything you do might later be examined in court. Every decision might be questioned. You keep detailed records, not just for medical reasons, but for legal protection, proof that you acted appropriately, that you followed standard practices, that you can't be blamed if something goes wrong. Economically, midwifery places you in an odd middle ground. You earn more than many working women, but less than skilled male craftsmen. A successful birth might net you anywhere from 1 to 5 drachmas, depending on the family's wealth and whether there were complications. That's decent money. A labourer might earn 1 drachma for a full day's hard work, but inconsistent. Some weeks you attend 4 births and earn well. Other weeks you earn nothing because babies don't arrive on schedule. You don't get paid for failed deliveries where mother or baby dies. You don't get paid for the hours spent attending a labour that doesn't progress. You don't get paid for the consultations women seek about fertility problems, menstrual issues, or other reproductive health questions. Those you handle for free or for token payments because turning away a desperate woman feels wrong. The wealthy families like Callias's pay well and on time. The poorer families pay what they can, sometimes in coin, sometimes in goods like olive oil or grain. Sometimes they promise payment later and then conveniently forget. You've learned to assess how likely a family is to pay before you invest too much effort, which feels mercenary but is actually survival. Socially, you exist in a weird, liminal space. Women trust you with their most intimate moments and darkest secrets. Men view you with a mixture of necessity and disdain. They need your services but resent that you have knowledge and power they don't. Other midwives are your colleagues and competitors simultaneously. Physicians pretend you don't exist except when they want to blame you for complications. You're invited to births but not to symposia. Women confide in you but don't necessarily treat you as an equal. You're essential to the community's survival, but easily forgotten when you're not actively needed. It's a strange life, being simultaneously crucial and marginal, respected and dismissed, needed and undervalued. But it's your life, and you've learned to navigate its contradictions with the same skill you navigate a difficult delivery. One birth at a time, one payment at a time, one day at a time. By the time you leave Callias's house, the sun is high and the streets are crowded with the midday bustle of Athens going about its business. You're exhausted. You've been up since before dawn, attended a birth that lasted hours, and now you're walking home with aching feet and blood-stained sleeves. But before you head to your own house, you have one more obligation to fulfill, and this one is religious rather than medical. You turn toward the small shrine of Artemis that sits at the corner near the agora. It's not one of the grand temples that tourists visit, just a modest stone altar with a carved relief of the goddess, weathered by time and pigeon droppings. But it's your shrine, the one where you make offerings after every successful birth, and you've been coming here for 15 years. You pull a small honey cake from your bag you'd prepared it yesterday, knowing you'd probably need it, and place it on the altar. Then you pour a libation of wine onto the ground, watching it soak into the earth. Artemis Eileithyia, you murmur, using the goddess's birth-specific epithet. Thank you for guiding my hands today. Mother and child both live because you granted it. This is the spiritual dimension of midwifery that's impossible to separate from the medical dimension. You're not just a skilled technician manipulating bodies according to Hippocratic principles. You're also a religious intermediary, someone who operates at the boundary between mortal and divine, who calls upon goddesses for help and interprets their signs. The Greeks don't distinguish between medicine and religion the way modern people might. Healing is divine intervention. Successful birth is a gift from the gods. Your skill matters, but divine favor matters more. Here's a mainstream historical fact. Ancient Greek religion had multiple deities associated with childbirth, each with slightly different roles. Artemis was the primary goddess of childbirth, which is ironic since she's also a virgin goddess. The myth says she helped her mother Leto deliver her twin brother Apollo, and from that moment became the protector of women in labor. Eileithyia is sometimes treated as a separate goddess, sometimes as an aspect of Artemiswas, more specifically focused on the pain and mechanics of labor. Hera, as the goddess of marriage, also had some authority over legitimate births, and various local deities and spirits could be invoked for protection during pregnancy and delivery. This means you're constantly navigating a complex theological landscape. Which goddess do you invoke for which situation? If a woman is having trouble conceiving, is that Artemis's domain or Hera's? If labor is progressing too slowly, do you pray to Eileithyia for swifter contractions or to Artemis for overall protection? If the baby is breech, is that a natural complication or divine punishment for some offense? You've developed your own system over the years, a practical theology born from observation and experience. Artemis gets prayers for general protection and safe delivery. Eileithyia gets invoked specifically during the painful stages of labor. Hera gets acknowledged if there's any question about the pregnancy's legitimacy or the husband's acceptance of the child. Local deities get there due to avoid offending anyone. And when you're really desperate, you pray to all of them simultaneously and hope someone's listening. Beyond formal prayers, There's the endless interpretation of omens surrounding birth. The Greeks are obsessed with reading divine signs in everything, and birth provides plenty of material for omen reading. The time of day a baby is born supposedly predicts their personality. Babies born at dawn will be cheerful and energetic. Babies born at midnight will be mysterious and perhaps touched by magic. Babies born during storms will have tempestuous personalities. You've been tracking this informally for years and have yet to see any correlation, but families believe it, so you nod and agree and file away your skepticism. The appearance of the placenta is another source of omens. A thick, healthy placenta means future fertility and prosperity. A thin placenta suggests difficulties ahead. If the placenta comes out with the membrane sac intact, the call that's considered incredibly lucky. Babies born in the call are supposedly blessed, destined for greatness, protected from drowning. You've delivered maybe 5 babies in the call over 15 years, and so far none have shown signs of supernatural destiny, but who knows? Maybe they need time to grow into their greatness. Here's a quirky bit of superstitious practice. Some families want you to bury the placenta under a specific tree in their courtyard, believing it will magically link the child to the household and ensure their loyalty as they grow. Others want it burned to prevent witches from using it in curses. Apparently, a person's placenta can be used in harmful magic against them, so destroying it removes that vulnerability. You've even had families ask you to throw the placenta into a river, symbolically sending away any ill fortune that might have attached to the birth. Historians still argue whether midwives actually believed all this supernatural nonsense or just played along to satisfy clients. But honestly, the line between belief and performance is blurry even in your own mind. You've seen enough strange coincidences, enough unexplained recoveries and mysterious deaths that you're not entirely skeptical about divine intervention. Maybe the gods do pay attention. Maybe prayers actually work. Or maybe the psychological comfort of ritual helps women cope, which indirectly improves outcomes. Either way, you're not stopping. You also maintain a small household shrine to Ilithia in your own home. It's just a corner of your courtyard with a small clay figurine, some dried flowers, and the accumulated offerings from years of devotion. Every morning you light incense there. Every evening you pour a libation. When you're heading to a difficult birth, you pray there first. When you've lost a mother or baby, you go there to process your grief and guilt. The shrine serves as both spiritual practice and professional necessity. Women who come to consult you about fertility or pregnancy problems see the shrine and understand that you take the religious aspects seriously. They trust you more knowing you're devout, that you're not just relying on technique, but also invoking divine favor on their behalf. Purification rituals are another major part of your work that exists at the intersection of religion and hygiene. After attending a birth, you're ritually polluted by contact with blood and death potential. You need to purify yourself before entering temples or participating in civic religious festivals. The purification process involves washing with water, fumigating yourself with specific herbs, and sometimes visiting a temple for formal purification rites performed by priests. Is this actually necessary? Well, washing after handling blood and bodily fluids is medically sensible, even if the Greeks explain it in terms of spiritual pollution rather than infection risk. The fumigation probably doesn't hurt. The temple rites are more about social acceptability than practical health, but they serve a purpose. They signal to the community that you're taking your ritual responsibilities seriously. You've also learned to interpret women's dreams during pregnancy, another service that blends the medical and mystical. A pregnant woman dreams of snakes? That's either a good omen, meaning the baby will be wise, or a bad omen, meaning danger, depending on how the snakes behaved in the dream. Dreams of water predict an easy birth. Dreams of fire suggest complications. Dreams of eagles mean the baby will be strong and brave assuming. It's a boy, of course. Girls apparently don't get prophetic dreams about eagles, or if they do, no one bothers interpreting them. You finish your prayer at Artemis's shrine and turn toward home. The religious obligations are satisfied for now. The gods have been thanked. The omens have been observed and recorded mentally for future reference. Maureen and her son are under divine protection, or at least you've done your part to invoke it. Whether the gods are actually listening is above your pay grade. You just do the rituals, say the prayers, and hope it helps. You're halfway home when you hear the morning song, that distinctive wailing that means death has visited someone's household. The sound stops you mid-step. It's coming from a house maybe 2 streets over, the high-pitched keening of professional mourners mixed with the deeper, genuine grief of family members. Your stomach drops because you know that sound too well, have caused it more times than you want to count. You alter your route to avoid passing the grieving household. Call it cowardice, but you don't have the emotional reserves today to witness someone else's loss. You've attended enough funerals of women and babies you couldn't save. Each one leaves a mark, like scars accumulating on your soul until you're not sure how much more grief you can witness before something fundamental breaks inside you. Here's what they don't tell you about midwifery when you're starting out. The technical skills are actually the easy part. Learning to examine a cervix, deliver a placenta, manage hemorrhage. That's just knowledge and practice. The hard part, the part that slowly grinds you down over years, is carrying the weight of every loss. Every mother who hemorrhaged faster than you could stop it. Every baby born already dead. Every family destroyed by complications you couldn't prevent. You remember them all. Every single one. Iphigenia was your first. A sweet woman, maybe 25, pregnant with her 4th child. The pregnancy seemed normal, no warning signs, no complications. Labour started naturally, progressed well. Then during the pushing stage, something went catastrophically wrong. Massive hemorrhage, blood pouring out faster than you'd ever seen. You tried everything: uterine massage, herbs, pressure, prayers. Nothing worked. She bled to death on the birthing stool while you knelt in her blood, still trying to save her, even though you knew she was already gone. The Babya boy survived. Her husband blamed you anyway, said you must have done something wrong, must have made a mistake. Maybe he was right. Maybe you missed something. You've replayed that birth in your mind 10,000 times, looking for the error, the moment where you could have intervened differently. You've never found it, but that doesn't stop you from looking. Then there was the twins, Caister, one where the father accepted only one baby. Both girls, both healthy, but the family was poor and claimed they could only afford to raise one child. You pleaded. You offered to find a family to adopt the second twin. You even offered to raise her yourself, though you had no idea how you'd manage that. The father refused. The rejected baby was left outside the city walls overnight. By morning, she was gone, probably taken by someone else to raise as a slave, possibly dead from exposure or wild animals. You never found out which, and you're not sure which outcome would have been better. Historians still argue whether infant exposure in ancient Greece was as common as the sources suggest, or whether it was rarer than we think and just got more attention in the historical record. You can tell them from personal experience. It happens regularly enough that you've witnessed it dozens of times, and it never stops being horrifying. The stillbirths are their own special kind of torture. You attend a labour, coach a woman through hours of pain and effort, catch a baby who emerges silent and limp. Sometimes you can tell early absence of movement during labour, the concerning heart tones. Other times it's a complete surprise. The baby seems fine until they're not, and suddenly you're holding a perfect little body that will never take a breath. Explaining stillbirth to grieving parents is impossible. They want to know why. What caused it? What did they do wrong? Could it have been prevented? And the honest answer, usually we don't know, is never satisfying. Ancient medicine has theories about stillbirth, insufficient heat in the womb, imbalanced humours, divine punishment, malformed umbilical cords. Some of these explanations have kernels of truth. Most are just attempts to make sense of senseless tragedy. Here's a mainstream historical fact. Maternal mortality in ancient Greece was staggeringly high, probably somewhere between 12% of all births resulted in the mother's death, which doesn't sound like much until you remember that women often had 5, 6, 7 pregnancies. That means maybe 500% of women died from pregnancy-related causes over their reproductive lifetimes. The leading killers were hemorrhage, infection, and obstructed labor, all things you deal with regularly and often can't fix. You've lost maybe 20 mothers over your 15-year career, 20 women who trusted you to keep them alive and whom you failed. Their faces visit you in dreams. Their voices haunt you when you're trying to sleep. The weight of their deaths presses on your chest during difficult deliveries, that voice whispering, "You're going to lose this one too." The psychological toll is something no one prepares you for. Other midwives understand when you gather for training or professional consultations, the conversation inevitably turns to losses, and everyone shares their horror stories like battle veterans comparing scars. There's dark humor in it, the kind of jokes that would horrify civilians but that help you cope with the trauma. "At least the hemorrhaging is quick," one colleague said after a particularly rough week where she'd lost 2 mothers in 3 days. Better than the ones who linger with infection, suffering for days before dying. You'd laughed because the alternative was crying, and if you started crying about the deaths, you'd never stop. Your husband tries to understand. He sees you come home after difficult births, sees the haunted look in your eyes, holds you when you finally let yourself cry. But he doesn't really get it. How could he? He's never held a dying woman's hand, never watched the light fade from her eyes while her newborn cries in the background, never had to tell a husband that his wife didn't survive. Your children have learned not to ask too many questions when you come home silent and withdrawn. They've learned to recognize the difference between tired from a normal birth and devastated from a loss. The older ones help with household tasks without being asked. The younger ones give you space. It's not fair to them, this emotional burden you carry into the family, but you don't know how else to cope. Here's a quirky bit about midwife grief. Some midwives keep tokens from their losses. A lock of the dead baby's hair, a scrap of swaddling cloth, small objects to remember them by. You don't do this because you're already carrying too much and don't need physical reminders. The memories are vivid enough without souvenirs. But you do visit the grave sometimes. Not all of them. Some families didn't want you at the funerals, blamed you too much for their grief. But the ones who understood that you'd done everything possible, that sometimes tragedy strikes despite everyone's best efforts. Those families welcomed you at the gravesides. You stand there and apologize silently to the dead. Tell them you tried. Promise them you'll do better next time. The worst part is that there will be a next time. Maternal and infant mortality are constants in your profession. You can reduce the risk with skill and care, but you can't eliminate it. Someone will hemorrhage too fast to save. A baby will be born with fatal deformities. An infection will spread despite all your precautions. And you'll carry that loss, add it to the collection, let it weigh you down a little more. You've considered quitting maybe 100 times, walking away from this profession that demands so much and breaks your heart so regularly. But then a woman comes to you, desperate and frightened, needing your help, and you can't refuse because you're the one who knows what to do, who has the skills that might keep her alive. So you keep going, one birth at a time, carrying the weight of the losses alongside the joy of the successes, hoping the balance doesn't tip too far toward despair. The morning song fades behind you as you turn toward home, but the sound echoes in your memory, mixing with all the other grief you carry. You finally reach home in late afternoon, and you're hoping for maybe an hour of rest before dinner. Your feet ache, your back hurts, and you smell like blood and olive oil and someone else's sweat. But as you approach your door, you see them 2 women lingering near your house, trying to look casual, but clearly waiting for you. One is maybe 30, dressed modestly. The other is younger, heavily veiled, glancing around nervously like she's afraid of being seen. So much for rest. You recognize this scenario immediately. These aren't women going into labor. They're seeking consultations, the kind women can't get from male physicians because the questions are too intimate, too embarrassing, or involve matters men simply refuse to discuss. Your house serves as an unofficial clinic for women's health, and apparently word has gotten around that you're available for private consultations in the evening hours when the streets are busy enough to provide anonymity. You unlock your door and gesture them inside quickly before the neighbors start gossiping. Your courtyard provides privacy-high walls, no direct sight lines from neighboring houses. You settle them on a bench and take your own seat, mentally shifting from exhausted midwife to professional consultant, even though every muscle in your body is begging for rest. Who's first? You ask gently. The older woman speaks. I'm Caris. I've been married 8 years. No children. My husband's family is threatening to divorce me if I don't conceive soon. Can you help? Infertility. This is one of your most common consultations and also one of the most frustrating because ancient medicine understands so little about why some women conceive easily while others struggle. You have treatment, some that might actually work, some that are probably useless but give women hope, which has its own value. Tell me about your monthly courses, you begin, launching into the standard diagnostic questions. Are they regular, heavy, or light? Painful? When was your last one? She answers. Regular cycles every 28 days, moderate flow, some cramping but not severe. Last one ended maybe 10 days ago. This all sounds normal, which makes diagnosis harder. If she had obviously irregular cycles or symptoms suggesting physical problems, you'd have a clearer path forward. And your husband, has he fathered children with anyone else? Previous wife, slaves, mistresses? Curry shakes her head. He's been married before. No children from that marriage either. This is important information that everyone ignores. Here's a mainstream historical fact. Ancient Greek medicine almost universally blamed infertility on women. The assumption was that men were naturally fertile and women's bodies were the problem too. Cold, too wet, wrong humoral balance, malformed wombs. The possibility that male infertility might exist was barely acknowledged in medical texts. But you've seen enough evidence to know that sometimes the problem is the man, not the woman, and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it because suggesting a husband might be infertile is a great way to get yourself in serious trouble. So you focus on what you can control. Optimizing Caris's fertility. I'm going to give you several remedies, you tell her. First, fenugreek and nettle tea, drink it daily. Both herbs are considered warming and help prepare the womb for pregnancy. Second, this pomegranate seed mixture. You reach for your supplies, pulling out a small pouch. Grind these with honey and eat a spoonful each morning. Pomegranate is sacred to Hera and promotes conception. Does any of this actually work? Historians still argue whether ancient fertility treatments had genuine pharmacological effects or were pure superstition. You've had some women swear these remedies helped them conceive after years of failure. You've had others try everything you recommend and still remain childless. The success rate is maybe 30%, which could be natural variation, could be the herbs, could be reduced stress from feeling like they're doing something. You genuinely don't know. Also, you continue, timing matters. You want to lie with your husband in the days immediately after your monthly bleeding stops. That's when the womb is most receptive to seed. The Hippocratic texts say conception is most likely in the first 10 days after menstruation ends. This is actually reasonably accurate advice, though the Greeks don't understand ovulation. They've noticed the pattern women who have sex right after their periods are more likely to conceive, but they explain it in terms of the womb being freshly cleansed and ready to receive seed rather than understanding the ovulatory cycle. Still, accidentally correct is better than wrong. After lying together, stay on your back for a while. Keep your hips elevated, put a pillow under them. This helps the seed stay inside and travel to the womb. Again, questionable physiological theory, but probably harmless advice. You give her a few more recommendations: avoid cold baths, eat warming foods like garlic and onions, pray regularly to Hera and Artemis. Then you name your Fione drachma for the consultation and herbs. She pays without hesitation, desperate enough that cost isn't a concern. The younger woman has been listening silently, and now that Caris is leaving, she looks even more nervous. You wait until Caris is gone, then turn to her. "What can I help you with?" She pulls down her veil slightly. She's maybe 16, pretty, and absolutely terrified. I've heard you can provide things to prevent pregnancy. Contraception, the other common consultation, and this one is even more fraught with legal and ethical complications. "Are you married?" you ask gently. "Yes, 3 months. But my mother died in childbirth, and her mother before that. I'm scared." Her voice cracks. "My husband says we should start trying for children immediately, but I'm not ready. I might never be ready. This is heartbreaking and completely understandable. If you'd watched your mother die in childbirth, you'd be terrified too. But providing contraception to a married woman without her husband's knowledge is legally questionable at best. The Greeks have complicated views on this. Preventing conception isn't the same as causing abortion, but a wife is still expected to provide heirs, and deliberately preventing that could be considered a breach of her marital duties. You make a decision. You're going to help her anyway. "I can give you 2 things," you tell her quietly. "First, wild carrot seeds. You've probably heard them called Queen Anne's lace. Chew a small handful immediately after lying with your husband. They're believed to prevent conception. Second, this pessary. You pull out a small linen packet containing a mixture of honey and something else. You insert this inside yourself before intercourse. It creates a barrier that prevents seed from reaching the womb." Here's a quirky bit of ancient contraceptive lore. The Greeks had dozens of contraceptive recipes, ranging from potentially effective to completely ridiculous. Some used pessaries made of various substances soaked in honey, lumps of wool infused with gum, even crocodile dung mixed with sour milk, which is horrifying but supposedly came from Egyptian medical practice. Some relied on herbs taken orally: wild carrot, rue, willow leaves. Some involved magical amulets or prayers. Modern analysis suggests some of these might have had real contraceptive effect. Shoni is spermicidal. Certain herbs might disrupt implantation, but most were probably ineffective. "How often do I need to use them?" she asks. "Every time you lie together, if you want to be sure. The seeds work better if taken immediately after. Don't wait. The pessary needs to be inserted beforehand. You don't mention that these methods are maybe 50% effective at best. You don't mention that she might get pregnant anyway, despite her precautions. You don't mention that if she does conceive and her husband finds out she's been deliberately preventing it, he could divorce her, or worse. She knows all this already. She's desperate enough to risk it. 2 obols, you say, keeping the price low because she's young and scared and reminds you of yourself at that age. She pays and leaves quickly, clutching her contraceptive supplies like they're precious treasures. They are, in a way, they represent control over her own body, choice in a world that offers women very little of either. After she's gone, you sit alone in your courtyard as the sun sets, thinking about the 2 consultations. One woman desperate to conceive, one desperate not to. Both coming to you because male physicians either won't help them or don't have the knowledge. Both trusting you with secrets they can't share with anyone else. This is the other side of midwifery, not just attending births, but managing the entire spectrum of women's reproductive health. Fertility, contraception, menstrual problems, sexual dysfunction, menopause, everything that male physicians find too distasteful or too female to deal with. It's exhausting, underpaid work that happens in the shadows, but it's also deeply necessary. You stand stretching your aching back. Your family will want dinner soon. But there's satisfaction in knowing that today, despite the exhaustion and trauma and ethical complications, you helped people, delivered a healthy baby, guided a mother through her first birth, gave one woman hope for conception and another woman hope for avoiding it. Not bad for a day's work. As stars begin to emerge in the darkening sky above Athens, you finally allow yourself to rest. Your family has eaten dinner bread, olives, cheese, and the lentil stew your mother-in-law prepared. Your husband asked about the birth at Callias's house, and you gave him the abbreviated version, healthy boy, no major complications, mother doing well. You don't mention the terror when the baby didn't breathe immediately, the complicated manoeuvring to rotate the infant into position, the delicate work of preventing tears. He doesn't need those details, and you don't have the energy to relive them. Your daughters helped clean up after dinner without being asked. Bless them. The older one, she's 14, Nowlingers near you as you wash your hands and face at the courtyard basin, scrubbing away the last traces of blood and olive oil. Was it difficult today? She asks quietly. She's reached the age where she's curious about your work, asking questions that suggest she might follow you into this profession someday. Every birth is difficult, you tell her honestly. But today was a success. Mother and baby both healthy. That's what we hope for every time. Do you ever get scared? She asks. When things go wrong? You pause, considering how much truth to share with a 14-year-old. Then you decide she's old enough to understand. Every single time. Fear is part of the job, but you can't let the fear paralyze you. You feel it, acknowledge it, and then you do what needs to be done anyway. She nods thoughtfully. You wonder if she'll remember this conversation years from now, when she's the one standing in a birthing room with a woman's life in her hands. Here's what you've learned after 15 years of delivering babies. The work never gets easier, but you get stronger. The losses still hurt, but you develop scar tissue that helps you carry the weight. The fear never disappears, but you learn to function despite it. Experience teaches you patterns, gives you instincts, helps you recognize warning signs faster. But experience also teaches you humility. No matter how skilled you become, birth remains fundamentally unpredictable. You think about Marine, probably nursing her son right now in Callias's house, exhausted and elated and overwhelmed by new motherhood. You think about Caris, desperately hoping the herbs you gave her will finally help her conceive. You think about the terrified young wife who left here with contraceptive supplies clutched in her fist. 3 women, 3 different reproductive struggles, all seeking your help because no one else will provide it. This is why you do this work. Not for the money, though. You need that to survive. Not for the prestige midwives. Don't get much of that. You do it because women need you. Because someone has to stand between laboring mothers and death. Because someone has to catch the babies, deliver the placentas, stitch the tears, manage the hemorrhages, and carry the emotional weight of every outcome, good and bad. You do it because Fainariti trained you, and her teacher trained her, and back through an unbroken chain of women keeping other women alive. You do it because one day your daughter might train under you, and she'll carry this knowledge forward to the next generation. This is how midwifery survives a near woman teaching another, one birth at a time, building a legacy of skill and compassion that exists outside official medical texts and male-dominated institutions. Your mother-in-law has prepared your sleeping area, wool mattress in the corner, blankets laid out, a small lamp burning low. She's stopped complaining about your work, mostly. After 15 years, she's accepted that this is who you are and what you do. Some nights she even asks about your patients, genuinely interested despite her earlier disapproval. You lie down, your body sinking into the mattress with a sigh of relief. Every muscle aches. Your hands are raw from washing and scrubbing. Your back protests from hours of bending over birthing stools. You're 35 years old and you feel ancient some days, worn down by the physical demands of this profession. But tomorrow, someone will knock on your door before dawn. There will be another labouring woman, another family in crisis, another opportunity to use your skills. And you'll get up, grab your bag, and rush through Athens' streets once more, because that's what midwives do. You show up. You stay calm. You guide women through the most dangerous, painful, transformative experience of their lives. You close your eyes, letting exhaustion pull you towards sleep. In the darkness behind your eyelids, you offer one final prayer to Artemis and Eileithyia. Thank you for guiding my hands today. grant me wisdom and strength for tomorrow's births. Keep all mothers and babies safe. And if tragedy must come, grant me the courage to bear witness with compassion. The lamp flickers. The household settles into nighttime quiet. Somewhere in Athens, a woman is probably in labor right now, attended by another midwife doing the same work you do. The cycle continues, endless and eternal, as long as humans exist to be born. You drift towards sleep. Your last conscious thought, a simple one. You did good work today. That has to be enough. And maybe it is enough. Just knowing that somewhere tonight a new mother holds her baby close, both of them alive, because you were there, because you knew what to do, because generations of midwives passed their wisdom down to you. The city settles into darkness, oil lamps guttering low in windows, the last market vendors packing their goods, the sound of Athens fading to the gentle rhythm of a world winding down for sleep. Your breathing slows, matching the peaceful cadence of night descending, and in this quiet moment between wakefulness and dreams, you feel the weight of the day lifting softly away like morning mist. The births you attended, the women you counseled, the prayers you offered, all of it blending together into something larger than yourself, a tradition stretching back through countless generations of women who understood that bringing life into the world is sacred work, difficult work, work that asks everything of you and gives back just enough to keep you returning, day after exhausting day. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new laboring mothers, new tiny humans making their dramatic entrance into the ancient world. But for now, right now, you rest. You let yourself simply be human, simply be tired, simply be a woman who has done her best and can do no more today. The gods watch over the city. Artemis keeps her eternal vigil over women in labor, and you can finally surrender to sleep, knowing that tonight at least all your patients are safe. Your husband's breathing deepens beside you, your children sleep in their corners, the household guardian spirits keep their watch, and you sink deeper into rest. The birthing room at Callias's house seems distant now, a memory rather than a place. But somewhere in that house, a newborn boy sleeps in his mother's arms, both of them dreaming peacefully, their lives forever changed by the journey they completed together. And you were there. You helped, you mattered. Sleep takes you gently, completely, pulling you down into darkness that holds no fear, only rest. The stars wheel overhead, the city dreams, and somewhere in the vast mystery of existence, another child will be conceived tonight, another pregnancy will begin, another mother will someday call for help, but that's tomorrow's concern. Tonight there's only peace, only rest, only the deep restorative sleep of someone who has earned it. Sweet dreams, midwife. You've done enough. You've done well, and in the morning when someone knocks before dawn, you'll rise again, ready, skilled, compassionate, but for now, just rest.